You just can't.
Okay, so a good sign.
So far, so good. I was that's and look around. Bingo.
Some eyeballs on it or something.
I'm on the city account. The meeting didn't show up. The city account. And so I've just entered in the. I entered in the meeting information from the city website. Dropped it into Zoom and this is what I have. So you're able to train the camera on that?
Oh. I have it. Oh, this is.
Or you can see this now?
No,
Oh.
I'm moving the camera around. Yeah, but it's not up there.
Oh, yeah, I didn't want it up there. Yes, not here, not here.
So you want me to show the screen?
Show the screen, yeah. So if anybody, and then Zoom if you can, and if anybody wants to log, when they log in, they can watch the screen.
Good. Thanks. Can't see your screen. Is that good, Bill, or you need something different?
Well, that's the correct direction.
We can't. Can you turn your screen so we can see it? Because that's how we steer.
Yes.
Is there a way to mirror it? Because it's backwards.
Oh, it is. That works.
For whatever reason.
Well, I can log him into Zoom on this computer if he wants, but.
So the alternatives,
This last.
yeah, I sure.
Just share it and.
I can just give the Zoom meeting.
So what I can do, let me just get the slideshow up and then I can share it. I can open it from my laptop. And then share the screen. And then.
You'll just advance.
It should be off.
Sure.
Yeah, and then
You'll do that.
I can,
Okay.
yeah, you just let me know, like.
You just can't show the last slide. So that's the one.
Oh, gotcha, okay. So at that point, that would be when you bring that up.
We're okay to start in?
I think so, I believe I'm exactly you're after that. Sorry.
You guys logged in too. I'm gonna be to see what you're seeing.
No, but I'm going to.
Yeah.
I can remember my.
Here. Okay. Council number 2. There.
Oh, but mine is.
All right,
Yay.
all right, success. Okay. 2 hours. Your council's vision, high level, and priorities for the upcoming budget process with that, so that you can share and then give Bill and the team the direction to align the budget. With what you're asking for, will be a key piece of this. I think we're at the point where I say a lot of this is the council's part of really having the conversation amongst each other. The team, they'll listen in, make sure you are following along. If you need clarifying questions, it goes to the council as well. If you need to clarify things, please do so. it's been an important part and something that all of you have been asking for, fearing that you need to get accomplished. So we used this quote earlier, they're coming together at the beginning. This has the day, we use it for a long period of time, but hopefully the morning was coming together. You all stayed together during lunch, we're still here, so now it's the working together, right? It's the council coming together and figuring out what that direction is for the team. And I think it's also important, this doesn't have to be the day where all the direction's there, and this is what you're gonna, put the stake in the ground for the next 4 years. But it's an important part that you leave today's conversation, common understanding, some of the things you talked about this morning, having the shared information, be able to stand behind, be able to answer the why you came up with what you came up with. And then as we already talked about, the key part of moving forward with the actual budget document that is going to be delivered to you in a very short period. Almost, Dustin already mentioned one thing already, but very similar to this quote, in order to serve its purpose, a vision has to be a shared vision. I think it's probably as appropriate as any time saying that today, where all of you are at, 5 new counselors coming to North Plains. Many of you have talked about that continuity, it's just a continuum, the last 60+ years of councils, but you are the council of the moment. And so your vision is what will drive the city forward for this period. So what we're hoping to do over the course of the next hour, 45 or so, is we're gonna go back to those individual themes. We'll just touch on them, but if anyone wants to stop, we can acknowledge this open session that we also shared these in the morning. We didn't really have the conversation around them, but so now it's more of the, is there things that you want clarification on or anything else? Talk about some of the techniques for visioning, and then we're gonna really get into the heart of this is what is important to all of you? What do you want to put on the paper? Interesting, we barely used any paper this morning, so it's all about the conversation, right? I'm anticipating we'll probably use a little more paper or whiteboards during this time as we get different ideas, some of the brainstorming activities that each of you will bring forward. And then at the end, we want to define what progress or next steps are like, and I think that's as important as anything. Because we leave here, so all of you are on the same page, well, as then the team knows this is what we need to do, this is what the council needs to do. And we don't step away with maybe 3 or 4 different ideas what next steps look like. We already talked about that, but let's go right to what matters most. So these next few slides that you've seen is really focusing on what matters most. And when you're in your visioning conversation, 30,000 foot level, it's really looking at what is the North Plains that you know today? What do you see for the vision of the future? Start talking about how you get there through some of your priorities. Team will influence that. Unfortunately, a lot of times, let's talk about today, the team shared these thoughts, is we get into an important time where it's not important or not urgent, but actually it becomes urgent, but not important because the community's in weighing in and sharing different ideas. And so sometimes it's easy to go there, but in this case, we want to stay at an upper level. What is urgent, what's important, or what is important, but not necessarily as urgent as other things. So many of you may have seen this in the past in different ways, but the whole discussion about rocks, pebbles, and sand. So rocks are your priorities or your vision. Pebbles are still important things, but not like priority. Sand are all the small things that we talked about. And you may have seen this done before. Personal life, can go to business, to government, is once again prioritizing what matters most. Oftentimes we'll start focusing on the small things. Small things in the jar first, then the next thing, and wait till the really important things till the end. It just doesn't fit. Literally won't fit. Where if you start the other way, get the big picture, priorities, your goals into the jar to start. Then the important things that support that, and then all the sand things fit. Oftentimes you like more room. So I think keep those things in mind as well. We'll work to make sure if we think there's things that are a pebble or sand, we can note them. But we'll try to keep coming back to what are those big things that the council's driving the direction on the what and the why, and then the how it comes with the team. So I just mentioned the what and the how. Oftentimes in these scenarios, like some of you already referenced, just in your style at work or your personal lives, you want to get to the how and fix things. But if we don't know what we're trying to fix or provide put the resources towards. But we don't really have any action or forward moving progress like you talked about earlier, just kind of stagnate out and everyone's on a different page. So today we're having vision priorities for strategies, we kind of come in there, but try to stay away from, the key actions because ultimately the team will be coming forward with a lot of that. So now just call them one of your pillars, just to kind of put it in perspective. So right here, we have 5 empty pillars. They may not be empty. You may have different ideas already, but somewhere 4 to 5. City manager Palo Alto many years ago told me he would work with his council and during goal setting, and they all agreed that four goals was the max. That 4 goals, 4 priorities, because that's, and so they put banners up, so the council spacing and the banners would be there. As council meetings came up and new ideas came up and they said, we want you to do this. He said, what banner are you going to take down? And I think that was just a good way of keeping it in front of you. Is that more important than what you just came up with or what you came up with during your goal setting? Because as we know, you're going to leave this room and things are going to happen between now and your next council meeting. You may get ideas from yourself. Something may happen in the community and people are reaching out to you. And so just trying to stay dedicated to coming up with the pillars of that foundation. So all of you can kind of be on that same page. And the team and community and your committees know where to go. So we'll just go through this quickly again. You don't have to go through all this, but at the very beginning, it's all about becoming a team. And it was a top priority for many of you, hopefully all of you. And this is the part that we're going to focus on now, is that clear, cohesive vision, one council. So I think when we lead the team, as well as yourselves, what you talk about, is it clear, is it cohesive, and does everyone understand exactly what the pillars are requiring the budget? Let's continue to listen and be curious. At the same time, that sense of urgency, council you shared as well. Let's make sure we do this right, make a good decision, just because there's an urgent matter in front of us. And so hopefully the conversation can do that on as well. And then engaging our community. So communications obviously came up multiple times in the morning. A lot of the focus of the group conversation at the end there, just talking about your communication internally amongst the council, like we said, amongst the team and the council, as well as the communication externally to your community members, making sure they're aware what's going on, the why behind things. So obviously, we're going to want to talk about that as it gets to the priorities and the budget. And then as Ashley gets there, she's going to hit on some of these key things. And this one, obviously, right here is where we're at, is making sure that everyone has good discussion, budget, well, big picture. The comprehensive understanding of the budget, I think, is going to take some time. Obviously, you have your budget process coming up and other means. I think now that the city manager and others are aware that you'd like that more conversation, that could be facilitated at a different time. So council, let's start with you. And why don't you just share with me and everyone from your perspective, what makes North Plains a great place? Yes.
I think we're a small, walkable community for the most part. That's what attracts residents.
Small and walkable.
I think for me, it's our people. It is literally our community and how we show up for each other. That's the nexus of small town feel for me.
A lot of ways to get involved.
Lots of ways to get involved. Okay,
Safe,
safe.
that's a big one. Family friendly. And I'd like to hope that we're a place that takes care of our underserved community.
Take care of industry. Other things that make this a great place? Low taxes.
limitless potential?
I think the beauty of our surrounding open spaces.
So like natural environment, like open space.
We're surrounded by.
It's really the surrounding farmland. That's what it comes down to. And what a beautiful place we live in, that from anywhere in town, you can go see these amazing vistas. It's a big part of what makes North Plains, North Plains.
Going down 26. Others?
I think it's the location too for people to commute
Mhm.
to do their jobs.
It's conveniently adjacent, nearby.
And to the beach and, you know, so it's a good location.
Proximity to many things, et cetera, et cetera.
And it's affordable.
Portable.
I mean, we wanted
What's
to,
going on?
it was affordable when I moved here.
Anything else that you feel?
We have a pretty good park. Library, it's phenomenal.
I think we've grown to have a more diverse population. I think that's a positive thing.
You're more diverse now?
Chris, can you expand, I liked your comment, but could you expand on what it's curious?
Yeah, I think just when I think about North Plains, like we have so much available to us at our fingertips to rewrite history or write the narrative. And I think about, you know, even like development, like thinking through development, thinking through city staff, public works, like there's just a lot that I could see our town accomplishing in the next 20, 30 years. That you might not necessarily see if you were to go to Hillsborough or Beaverton, right? They have those infrastructures in place. Was really my intent with that. That's potential.
I would say motivated for change. As far as our community as a whole and the vibe, if you will, there is a real appetite for change and pursuing opportunities.
Is it defining then what change looks like to the part of this, or is it different definitions?
I mean, that's a separate topic, but I think our community keeps showing up in different ways, saying that they are motivated to have things look different than they have.
Any others? Well, 3 sheets. Already surpassed the morning, just first question, so that's good. All right, well, let's move on to your vision for North Plains. So what I want to do is, I just want to read what's in your current vision statement, just as a starting point for all of you. So it says the North Plains vision statement, I believe this is right in the comprehensive plan and maybe in other documents as well. Maybe just listen to what each of these words say. So in the year 2035, very appropriate, we're looking out to the future. So, geez, only a decade. I feel like it's like 35 years. Only a decade from now.
Where's my flying cars?
I don't know, where's Y2K? Residents of North Plains enjoy a safe and welcoming community as a livable place for people of all ages. North Plains is an independent community within Washington County that maintains a small town character while accommodating current and future residents. Citizen participation is strong and community members can see the result of their involvement. Community gathering places and events form the heart of North Plains. Does that resonate with the council for the most part? I'm not saying the wordsmith, does that feel like a starting point for what a vision could look like? And then under that, you have 6 categories, I believe. You identified the community, neighborhoods, connectivity, economic opportunity, heritage and natural resources, and public services. So all different things that you talked about in different ways today. So what I want to do now is I'm going to hand out cards again to the council this time, and ask you to write down, it can be keywords, it can be a phrase or a sentence, of what your vision entails for North Plains going forward.
And this is the 100,000 foot
Yeah.
level.
Yeah, this is kind of the big picture, and we'll just start working our way down. What does that mean?
And it'd be a copy of the statement that you rattled off. It'd be really lovely to project that for a minute.
Oh.
Yeah, just play in.
Yeah, there you go. Get that going. Okay, as the mayor said, you're way out there on the airplane right now, cruising altitude of 5,000 feet. And just kind of some of those key things that you think the vision for. Yes. Oh, down here. Back down. So maybe what I'll do, would it be helpful if I looked up that statement I read, does the mayor do that, check it out there?
Yes.
Jump out of this real quick. Oh, I'm not up.
Actually.
You want to get a third or? I think I just see a couple pens still moving. All right, let's give everyone another minute to wrap up or so. So, to your point, what we'd like to do is go around and everyone share. I'll try to capture them here. If you have something that's similar to the same statement, just notice that someone else's notice.
Yeah, you're gonna see a lot of the same trends going around the room, I feel, so. I'm not a wordsmith, I just made up points, bullet points, I have 4 of them. Number 1 is control over how we grow. Bullet point 2 is leadership. That plans ahead to keep what we have and what we like. Because these things gotta breathe each other. Third is opportunities for involvement. And my 4th, which is probably higher up than number 4, is keep expenses down.
Keep expenses down.
Yes. If you ask any department, I really need any more money, right? We're always looking for ways to spend more. And that's something that's needed, but we have to figure out ways to stop spending and keep spending lower. Otherwise, tax go up. Definitely.
We talked about, make sure we all are on the same page, clarifying questions for counselor, what he shared. Yeah. Anyone want to go next? Jump in?
I can just go.
Yeah.
Do you want bullet point or do you want verbatim?
Maybe bullets are probably easiest for everyone, but if you want to read it, I can try to
Yeah.
capture it.
To be a vibrant town rooted in community, culture, and collaboration. North Plains is known for its small town charm while staying innovative. And I think just those bullet points there would be the community, culture, and collaboration.
Seeds.
And then the final bullet point would be small town charm and innovation.
I put vibrant in mine, is that fun?
Yep, yep.
Then you said innovation is another one?
Correct.
Clarifying questions on that one?
You expand on the innovation idea, I like it, just want to hear more.
Yes, yes. Again, I'm thinking like very broad, forward thinking and just, again, in that same sense of we are controlling the destiny. We are essentially like writing the future of North Plains. Excuse me. However, knowing that we might have limited resources or different approaches than a larger city, we have to be innovative and think outside the box.
What I'm hearing is kind of optimizing and being more efficient.
So really, it's kind of connected to the top bullet in a way. Ooh, can I go next?
Yeah.
So top bullet, I'd like you to add a hyphen and put that word, like attach the word incremental.
Oh,
How we grow incrementally.
Well,
Yeah,
Or maybe just add it as a separate one.
yeah,
it's
maybe
related
yeah.
to,
do incrementally separate because, I mean, do incrementally, you lose a lot of the goodness of
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
great.
Ahead of time, you say a little, but next thing you know,
Let's combine them after we get them all up.
Okay.
yeah.
So incremental in terms of how we grow, not flying the plane and building at the same time is the intention of how I said that. Service optimized for enhanced livability, meaning let's make the town, useful for all.
Service optimization.
Yeah, service optimized for enhanced livability. Let's have a well-rounded city, so we have things to support the people who we bring here. Serve. Sustainment of natural resources, and maybe even leveraging it as a unique differentiator.
I like that one a lot, just to kind of piggyback of embracing that we are different than the rest of Washington County and using that as a selling point, kind of almost an agritourism type thing. I like that a lot.
And then Ariel, you had a statement that you said, and I can't remember what it was, but it was livable for all. So like the service,
Basically that I would hope, and this is maybe a little aspirational, but it's the value that I want to live, that we are a community who supports our marginalized communities, our underserved communities, because we care.
so live, so like supporting of all. If you can make that like, there you go, inclusive is the word. That's a good one.
I just put inclusive community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve. I'm not pithy today.
Any questions for Counselor?
Can you elaborate a little bit more on like the optimizing for enhanced living? Like what
Service optimized.
like three things like come to mind? What would that look, what would success look like for that?
I could give you specifics, so like a grocery store. When I was door knocking, that was like a main theme of a lot of the different neighborhoods. A lot of people want more visibility to our police after hours, that was another theme. We also have a senior community who has needs for like laundry service and whatnot too. Which our food bank is actually helping them with. So there's a lot of different things that we could do to well round out the city and just make things that are a bit more livable. Thank you.
Oh, and pharmacy. Pharmacy was under one and rec. We door knocked together our pharmacy conversation.
Yeah, we had those problems when I did it too. Sidewalks with as well. They're $650 a linear foot. So how do we pay for that? There's no budget. And we build things a little bit at a time. So we build things a little bit tiny up this garbage we have right now about some houses have sidewalks and we don't, because we're not, we didn't have a big flat. So we had to do the gasoline tax. We could get a loan to build sidewalks. The grocery store probably have is we don't have enough economic to make it feasible for somebody to have a grocery store. They have a grocery store and they can subsidize it with their own cash, but what business wants to do that? They want to make a profit, it's enough mouths to feed out of the store.
See, we're not that how though.
Thank you. Next person want to go? Mary?
I saw a hand, but I will go next.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I did not do this in bullet points, my apologies, I'm too verbose. But I do want to point out that from the existing vision statement, I actually really loved everything about this. I would love to see stronger alignment to it. But one of the things that really stood out to me as one of those hallmarks of what we really want North Plains to look like when we're walking around in 10 years is that community gathering places and events form the heart of North Plains. Us building a structure where community can exist and grow and, that be kind of the hallmark of, oh, I want to live in North Plains because they have this amazing community.
So you said building the community structure. events.
Which was actually the front end of what I was going to say here, that everything we do is anchored in community. Our focus is to serve and benefit our community. Remaining a small town, preserving for longer term generations, our beautiful surrounding spaces is a personal priority of mine. kind of echoing Mandy's point, providing services to bring people together. Consistently excellent communication. Responsiveness and taking action on simple, good ideas to build momentum. Increasing walkability and access to spaces for families and pets to play. I think the dog park is definitely secondary to the grocery store, but becoming a hot button issue as we have more and more people and more animals. Keeping pedestrians, cyclists, and homes safe. Maintaining affordability and supporting those underserved populations. Embracing and celebrating diversity. Growing in measured, sustainable, sensible ways that directly benefit our community and provide services while being fiscally responsible.
And that, it was the underserved populations that I forgot.
Can we go back and I lost train of thought when you were sharing some, so if we go back.
Sorry, where'd we?
We were building out Mandy's service, cat service, and then my mind went to your next comment, so.
No worries. Let me see where. We were talking about providing services to bring people together. I think that's where I was talking about Mandy. Consistently excellent communication. Responsiveness, active engagement. Taking action on simple, good ideas, build momentum.
That part of the responsiveness,
Yeah, I think that definitely could be.
taking action on, what was it? Taking.
Simple, good ideas to build momentum. I mean, I think we can all agree that we're doing this on a bit of a shoestring. So anything that we can do that leverages that power of community, that leverages smart ideas, and we can do something good for cheap, that'd be great. Increasing walkability and access to spaces for families and pets to play. Keeping pedestrians, cyclists, and homes safe. Maintaining affordability and supporting underserved populations.
You had one, right before that one? Before.
Keeping pedestrians, cyclists, and homes safe. Aren't you glad you only gave me 2 cards? Yeah.
All right.
We got the maintaining affordability and supporting underserved populations. We're embracing and celebrating diversity. And the big one, growing in measured, sustainable, sensible ways that directly benefit community and provide services.
Growing in sustainable.
Sustainable, measured, sensible, fiscally responsible, ways that directly benefit the community and provide services.
Directly benefit the community.
And provide services.
All right. Any questions for the mayor? Clarifying questions?
That was a lot of writing. Thank you, Steve.
Board, sorry. All right, we have a few more. Council President, you were good to go.
So economic opportunities within the city. City services are appropriately defined and funded.
Appropriately defined.
Yes, please.
Okay.
Rural, or sorry, let me rephrase it, small town, independent lifestyle. Something,
You said independent?
yeah.
Okay.
And then semi-self-sufficient. As in not large.
Oh. North Plains semi.
Yeah. And then just a +1 point, things that James said. So control how we grow and opportunities for involvement work. Do I had very similar, so just +1.
Any questions? Of Council President on any of these? Just for my own self, is not being part of Metro typically viewed positively in this community?
Yes. We don't want it to be pulled to do it by somebody else that.
Much better.
Well said, James. I think it's also part of, again, this existing mission statement of being an independent community within Washington County. I don't know, I'm just gonna go through mine, whether you guys decide if they're up there or not. Diverse committees and boards with term limits.
Committee reports.
Yeah.
With term.
Yes.
Right.
I think better transparency and communication has been communicated. I have a small, tight growth plan that the community agrees on. I believe that's been mentioned.
Small.
That the community agrees. Yeah, I think that's the only addition. During our staff, I want more police and public works available to make sure, and then to make sure our employees feel valued, our staff feel valued.
So more PD and public works, the number of capacity. That
Is that a vision or is that more about how we're doing, or reading things like safety? I mean,
Yeah.
my question is that more an action item.
okay, and then part of it was the team.
Team feels valued.
This is throughout all the functions.
Correct.
Okay.
Safe streets with sidewalks that are smartly put in. Increase public volunteerism, involvement and pride, and then that might have been said as well. That we have town halls. In downtown commercial areas. Love that.
Is it just downtown or the downtown and commercial areas?
And. That's fantastic. This one's controversial.
Go for it.
To ban data centers or those that strain or drain our natural resources and provide little jobs.
And what?
Data centers or those along those lines that strain or drain our natural resources and provide little jobs.
Right?
And then I know with our UGB recommendation, it was kind of more homes than businesses, but I kind of feel like let's put in whatever the HNA or OHNA suggests, but then kind of go more business heavy to support the taxes in that way.
So, more
More businesses and
business.
minimum amount of home, like whatever our,
Can I still make a suggestion?
yeah.
That maybe we get at that balance the tax or work towards it. Is that the idea?
Yeah, and I kind of see that as kind of trying to get more businesses in because they don't drain the resources.
But there's multiple ways,
Level,
yeah,
like make a division and then see the how later.
Yeah.
so there's multiple ways to do that. That's one.
Bill mentioned a balance.
A more like working towards a more balanced tax base.
We do, we'll,
Is that okay?
Yeah, no, please, that's what
Because then that helps. I guess what I suggest that language because then it also kind of helps with not just planning thinking, but budget thinking. You know what I mean? So.
Can I ask a clarifying question? If we're finding the balance, which I agree with, is the priority that you were trying to get to, the vision that you have, a North Plains where there are more businesses that people can patronize, or is the priority that you're trying to get to budget related? Like, or fewer houses or
Sounds like
like,
It kind of tied together, the more, I mean, in my head, and the
Okay.
way this has kind of been explained to me.
fair enough. I just want to make sure that we understood what, like, the motivation and the goal that you were trying to hit was on that.
My biggest goal is it's hard for me to even get out on in Glencoe in the middle.
That's
And
valid.
so the more people we bring in, the harder traffic, which is another thing, streets and traffic safety coming in later.
Mhm.
And so I feel like put in what we have to by by mandate and law. And then maybe focus more on businesses to help.
to clarify, Dustin.
Just a clarifying thing, that also includes helping us in the community. If we have a balanced tax base.
Yeah, and that and our services here because those businesses are here.
Okay.
Sorry. No, you're just. Better zoning to protect our current city. I know we have the TGM grant coming, but, I know planning commission knows there's help needed, and I'm, hoping to support them in that.
Right.
Kind of went along with something else here, but farmer's market, pharmacy, car wash, laundry, grocery store, that's somewhere else. I have no metro, so to. Citizens feel heard and communicated with. More internet providers.
Oh, yes. That'd be good for conference calls.
Safe water lines, buildings and roads. Our backup water supply. And then my safe streets and traffic flow.
Say sidewalks, buildings and roads.
Safe water lines, right now, I think we're not safe for an earthquake. Is that,
Oh, as far as, it also goes with Independence because we have our water line from the Water Commission coming in from Hillsborough. And so that's our only line into town right now. And I think the backup storage you're talking about is
yes.
So I think maybe that's almost a disaster recovery, if you wanted to put a different name to it, resilience or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, disaster.
We're not talking about water safety, just to be clear, since this is your phrase.
Water security.
Water security. I mean, how to keep that line safe in a disaster.
Uncontrollable circumstances.
Even if we're on the rising.
Roads and buildings, is that what I heard? Or
Yeah.
just the one before?
Internet providers. Or communication providers. And then safe streets and traffic flows.
All right, so we had some clarifying questions. Any further ones? The team have anything that? That's good that you worked on the security of your water lines, not the safety of your drinking water. Is one. Well, everyone knows the North Plains, the water is fine.
We are good. We got an outstanding achievement on that. We good.
This is why we work as a team.
There you go. All right, last but absolutely not.
I have equitable, inclusive, and accessible, but I think inclusive actually pulls in both. If we are truly inclusive, we are equitable and
So you put
accessible.
plot one here.
Enhanced livability that is economically supported and sustainable.
How you put that?
You said supported and sustainable.
Economically supported and sustainable.
Okay.
A welcoming and connected community. That could be done in lots of ways. Be between areas, physically, buildings, it could be through community events like a town hall, all kinds of things. And then this one I had initially government and community, but I think what I mean is the big C of city and the small city. So both city and city working together positively and creatively for North Plains' future.
Okay, but city and this.
Small city and then small city, so like the government side of things, all of us
In partnerships.
and the rest of the community, whether in all of its different ways. Working together positively and creatively for North Plains' future.
And creative.
And just to piggyback on the conversations that we've been having about community in so many different ways, I think, at least for me personally, community is a broad concept, and we have, we have the city of North Plains, we have the boundaries of our municipality, and we have a broader community who shares our city services and whose kids come to our schools and whose, farmers bring their produce in to be part of North Plains, to me, is more than just our boundaries. It is our neighbors, it is our business stakeholders, it is our all the interconnectedness of that, rather than just saying that we have this concept, I'm just going to name it, of, outsiders and insiders. And I think that as we move forward and we're building that vision of the future, it's really for all of us.
It's always a,
That's not what I wanted to say. I want to say city and city, like the boundary, because I think that's where the responsibility lies in terms of our, fiscal oversight, in terms of our policymaking, et cetera. However, we have to recognize there is a sphere of influence, whether that is coming from Washington County, whether that is coming from people who are outside of the city limits, et cetera. But I don't think that we are one together. And I think that, I can't take on, I don't think the city can take on the responsibility for all of those outlying areas.
It's not
And I
a
think,
responsibility.
we share schools, but we share them with a district that's
No.
not our city.
yeah.
What I'm saying is that there's an interconnectedness, that they are going to be part of the consumers in our businesses. They're going to be part of our schools. They're going to be part of who's visiting our parks. And in the same way, how can we partner with them and have better communication with our stakeholders as a broader. I
So
think
that
that's all
would
I'm saying.
include,
is
that
that-
would include tourism and anybody coming into North
Exactly.
Plains. So that might be a survey.
Gas over here. The thing is, people that live outside the city are not paying our taxes, they're not contributing, but they're using a lot of resources, and not because of fault of theirs, but they chose to live out there.
I'm
So
just saying,
they,
insiders and outsiders doesn't serve
but
us.
they chose to live in a place without less regulations, with less rules, right? So now they're saying, we choose to live over here, so we pay less, we're gonna use your services, plus we're gonna tell you how we want you guys to live. But we're choosing to have less rules, so they're already having less, we can't service them as we can service ourselves, because they don't pay our city manager. They don't pay all of our things we have to have services for. They're not part of our water systems. None of that is what they're contributing for. So we can listen to them, but we can't cater to them.
That's an important
That's what I'm trying to say.
distinction, that it's part of the conversation, not that we are being influenced by them
Oh, we
necessarily,
absolutely are.
but that we realize, even just when, we're, something as simple as providing an economic development grant for a new business in town. Their consumers are more than just the population of North Plains city limits. Hopefully, we're attracting that agritourism. Hopefully, we're attracting from our surrounding communities. There's all of that intersectionality, and it's this insiders, outsiders concept that I want to move away from, rather than an awareness of we are part of a broader ecosystem.
So can we say that? Can we say,
Yeah.
consider the sphere of influence, those who engage in our community, that could be tourism, that could be people coming in, whether it be the school district, which isn't ours either.
Right.
That's Hillsborough.
We partner
can we
with
say
Small Valley Fire
consider-
Rescue.
Consider the larger ecosystem.
Yeah, I really like how you summed that up. Thank you.
Instead of saying, recognizing that, it may be appropriate at times to consider the larger ecosystem. Maybe there's a survey done or something, or it may not be because tax dollars are at play and the resources, a decision to be made about resources that it wouldn't make sense in that.
You got to the heart of that,
So-
William.
I'd like to clarify, Ants was on the, was support. I think I like it, but I just want to understand what your thought was.
Oh, you like it, I can tell you. No. My thought was that we're always trying to improve livability here. And I think basic livability is, you've got the roof over your head, it's relatively safe, those sort of things, but we're always trying to enhance that. And people are asking for that. But we can't necessarily do that unless it is economically supported, but it also has to be sustainable. So there's talk, I'll give an example. Let's do an after-school program, or let's do a summer program for kids. Great idea. We don't have staffing for it. We don't have someone to develop that program, but unfortunately, we also can't sustain it. So we might get a grant to try something that's great, or to do something, but we need to be looking towards the longer sustainability of making those enhanced livability pieces permanent. That's what I meant by that.
Also, did you have more? Sure. Okay,
No, that's it.
last one was the key one.
Yeah.
Some tips.
Yeah.
All right, so everyone has shared, let me get these papers. Everyone see what the lights are in?
I like it. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we have the album. I
Always
was like,
do that. I take up the third read the box.
so last few times we had these, I don't know if he's gonna do it this time, but what generally happens is they go and they endorsement, it's like, here's your vision. And that's the bit of like, that's not right. We want a vision to look like this, and there's a couple of sitting back, like, yeah, kind of, but not quite. So, it's a work to try to get this into 4 or 5 bullet points.
Well, some of these things I feel like are now, like how to do something versus, or an action to a policy in place to make something happen, to make it more livable, to make it more safe, to make it that sort of thing. So I think that that's important as well. So the other word inclusiveness, there's lots of ways, and we've listed some of them up there that bring that into play.
I think you can also consult a lot of ideas as well. There's a bit of themes. As Dave mentioned, there would.
Well, and maybe that's one way to approach it. I suspect, Steve, this is where you're going, is grouping these into those 5-ish pillars. We've talked a lot about community. We've talked a lot about communication. We've talked a lot about,
Economic,
It's exactly what I have 4, it's gonna be 5 probably, different colors. Yeah, I don't think today, one amount of time, so I actually can have a chance here coming up as well, is just grouping these. Make sure you're all on the same page, like you said, then we come back with a proposal on some of the key themes. We're gonna have all this in the notes, so we're not gonna lose any of this, and as some of you have already said, there's some how going on. Some of them support each other, and so, you know, as future conversations happen, next steps, you can decide what to do with that, so, right now, it's 1:46, so I think in the next 10-15 minutes back, I think we can do it probably faster than that. Let's try to group these. I'll just have common colors. We'll just circle all the ones we think are within that theme. Make sure I'll be on the same page, and we'll come back with a proposed way of what those key pillars are. And then if there's words in the thing, or you guys want to add your own touch to it, I think we can find a way.
Will that help?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
So let's see here. You know, I should get some light.
Might need some light. Well,
So let's have some.
Yeah.
We can't do that.
Just like the screen. Turn that up.
yes, let's turn the lights.
See, you just turn.
Turn the lights on. There you go.
That's better.
So I think some guidance for the future, when we do this again, when we pick out 4 things. And so they'll have probably at 5. Maybe we could have it that way.
That's what we're doing right now. We're grouping them into the
Yeah,
5 categories.
There's a lot more.
So I think growth is a category.
Yep. Anywhere that grow. We put the plan ahead. Is that around growth as well?
All of
And
that.
also economics. So I have 2 of those things together, because growth, we have to sustain it and figure out how we're going to do it. So it's like a leadership to make those decisions, and they may not be popular ones. But that's one.
Over here, I'll capture the main themes. And I'll put them down here, and I think you all agree that's the main theme, so growth.
Well, I kind of put them up here.
well, so let's not define our 5 yet. Let's kind of pitch out some ideas for what the 5 might be based on what we're grouping this as.
What's another in your mind?
Economics.
Hearing,
Economic development. For the things, or
Spending.
fiscal responsibility maybe is another, because we're thinking about what a pillar of value might be.
Right.
So fiscal responsibility is better than saying like economic.
This fiscal economically supported and sustained. That's 2 of them.
And customer service.
Yeah, if we're only gonna have 5 though, I kind of want to make finance just 1, whatever it is.
So I'm just gonna capture them here rather than grouping right now. You think your minds are all ready to track, so.
Yeah.
Let's go through it. So,
I hear communication coming up a lot. I hear community coming up a lot.
Community service was I think is better.
And I mean, there's multiple aspects of community too, right? We're talking about this high level pillar that's going to have community engagement. It's going to have community service. It's going to have community programs, you know, all of that stuff.
So can we go higher than fiscal responsibility and say, you know, sort of economics or economy? Because that, all of that gets included in there, you know, whether that's, you know, creating economic opportunities so that you can have balanced,
those are your economic
Tax base.
development, from your, how much you spend on city services, is that where you're going with this, all different aspects?
Maybe if we go away from this, we can back into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you look at the themes.
Pause the financial part maybe and see if we can suss out some more.
Because Hannah's she's being nice,
Oh.
patient. all
That's
fine.
I think that was my original thought was, when I think about the vision and like the values, right? These are like, what do we want to be known for? And for me, fiscal responsibility is just a default, like we should be executing that no matter what. That's just part of our roles. So I think thinking broader to what Councilor McCall Wallace had mentioned of just the economic portion. If we end up landing on that, I would rather be more high level on that than fiscal responsibility.
If you have strong economy, for example, you have fiscal responsibility, you have,
I think she said innovative in that it's intent, maybe smart and strategic with current board resources. I like how you use that.
It's hard to talk.
Strategic.
Well, so I think the economy, your finances are all key pieces. Let's
Yeah.
kind of move on to those bigger pillars and themes. You're tracking really good there with the. So we talked about, I didn't put community up, we already referenced it, so community, was that another key one that all of you wanted on here?
I think community,
Is it livability? Is it-
involvement, safety. Yeah, I mean, it's really all of those subheadings of community. So community is a great pillar from my perspective.
Others all right with that?
Yeah.
It's probably been one of the most talked about things today, is supporting your community and everyone involved. Okay, just, thank you.
Apart from that, I mean,
Well,
I think
there's
there's livability. I think livability is one of those key concepts, right?
The livability was under community.
I see safe up there in a lot of places.
Which could go under
Which could
community.
go under livability, which. could
Or
go-
community, yeah.
Yeah,
So we're gonna.
I kind of want to separate livability from community, because community to me is more like services and how we're engaging and how we're listening to them. And livability is those qualities of our physical town of, you know.
And it could be the growth, it
safety
could
and-
be associated with growth, for example.
Right.
Connectivity.
So
You're welcome.
livability, I think, let's keep it separate from community.
Everyone okay with that there? Livability?
Um, Stewardship is another really high level concept.
Well, I'm gonna ask about city services, 'cause that's been come up.
Yeah.
Do you see stewardship in that way as well?
Stewardship should go under physical and
Well-
possibly under services.
I was
I think so
thinking
too.
stewardship could even be the high level where city services, fiscal responsibility, all of even the environmental responsibility to protect our natural resources, like all of that is stewardship. It's our responsibility to our community and our community's future.
I think we need something about. Where were you going to see before, sorry, I lost it.
But how much stewardship can we actually own?
I think inclusive.
Within our scope of control, obviously.
Yeah, because there's some control of only this, what we have,
It's inclusive.
anything outside of
also
it gets taken up by the state or
making
those
sure-
were our something else, right? So
I mean,
it's gonna be forced stewardship if we just take care of your front yard.
that it's-
but that's something as a concept that can fit a lot of these
I
things.
guess I mean, all of it. Thank you.
I was asking if stewardship meant, was the delivery of services, make sure you have the.
I think orientation stewardship means like, what is that, there is a, Dr. Seuss thing, he's the, lumber box or.
Oh,
I think you're right.
We speak for the
Right.
trees. I mean, there's a little bit of the responsibility for natural resources and, you know, hey, it'd be nice if when my kids are grown, there was a tree or two.
Yeah.
Sure. But Mandy, you seem like you have something to say.
Oh, I was just, my finger went pointing to yes, yes.
Okay. But yeah, I think stewardship is really to me, you could put the fiscal responsibility,
Yeah.
all of those city services, the way we show up for our community, our responsibility as council, as staff is stewardship.
So, like excellence.
Well, excellence, I would hope, is a component of stewardship.
But I'm
Stewardship.
saying to give it that adjective, you don't want just stewardship, we're responsible, we're doing stewardship right now.
You want excellent stewardship. I like that.
Can I also just throw this out there?
Yeah.
I'd be curious to know what staff, like if you were to pick one pillar, what would staff want to be known for? Like think through like 30 years from now on a resume and someone's like, oh, you worked for the city of North Plains? They're known for fill in the blank. Like what would you want to see? And I don't want to steer this too far off topic, but I'm just curious input from staff of what might add if there was an extra pillar up there.
This process quite a few times in other cities, and almost every single component is customer service.
Oh.
It's a good one.
Well, and I mean, that's a theme that I've had come up just in my personal experience. Sometimes, what the community feedback we get, that feeling of customer service. You guys have a really tricky job with, a customer base that is our entire population plus some. But yeah, being able to show up for your various tiers of customers, whether that is the city council, whether that is our community, whether those are our businesses, with that excellence and responsiveness, and that they know if they have a problem or a question, all I've got to do is reach out to the city and these guys are fantastic. That's something I would love to be known for as
What
well.
about other things? Since we opened the door, I'm curious.
I have a clarifying question, or maybe just something to think about. I know we're limited, we go into our next session soon, but I heard a lot of you mention that it's really important to be an independent city in Washington County. And I also heard a lot of you talk about all of the ways we're connected with other areas and partners and so forth. And so I'm just curious about, I guess, what does an independent city mean? As a staff person trying to work towards that, anyway.
That's a great question. And I can see that we sort of signaled that two different directions. At least for me personally, the distinction is that, in our partnerships with TDFNR or Washington County Sheriffs or WCCLS, those are deliberate, intentional partnerships, which are ostensibly negotiated with favorable terms on both sides. And, that is how small towns like ours are able to leverage those broader systems and have access to things that we could never afford directly. But the independence aspect comes in, with we control our own destiny. And the decisions that affect North Plains should come from North Plains as much as possible, within the state framework that we all have to exist in. But that, we don't necessarily want to be identical to Hillsborough. We don't necessarily want to be part of Metro or part of some of these broader Washington County values and priorities, that we are a distinct community that is in control of where we go from here.
Okay.
Anyone else want to share from the team? Question?
I just want to share some thoughts, just looking at it and we're trying to group them. And so, and these are just going through my own perspective lens, but I just had 4 of them. An inclusive, connected community with excellent stewardship, strong, supported, and sustainable economy, and an independent city with high livability. That those are some of the things that I saw up here and that I've heard people say.
Yeah, I think.
Do you want to go through each one of those again? Just we'll stop
Sure.
here.
Inclusive, connected community.
Okay.
Excellent stewardship. strong, supported, and sustainable economy. And an independent city with high livability.
The council, how's the council feel about those as your pillars?
I have a headache.
Lost the one we had for earlier, small town feel.
And there you go. And small town character, feel, charm, vibrant small town charm.
You wrapped up in a nutshell. Take a snap on
Let's take a picture. So,
Yeah, I mean, whatever we decide the pillars are, I think we've basically come up with the same concepts. It's just a matter of wordsmithing. Did we like growth or did we like, frankly, very eloquent with how you put that? What I think we want to do is be really cognizant that those are on your PowerPoint slide, literally the pillar.
Yeah.
And then, you know, something that the public hasn't gotten a chance to see, but we had some screenshots of a Tiger document that you had shared with, you know, those 5 Bs. What I see is turning those pillars either into a much more robust vision statement that's a paragraph, or each of those is going to have a bunch of these other nuggets that we've identified kind of underneath it, because once we summarize all the way up to that pillar level, it almost loses the meaning for anybody who didn't just sit here and have this wonderful conversation. So got to do both.
And one thing I think is important is that we're at one moment in time right now. And so this is a vision statement looking out 20 years or whatever it might be. Sort of saying, where are we going? What do we see? And so that staff can align things. And some things that they line up will be 20 years out from now based on this. And so it's kind of leaving it open enough to recognize the nuggets and the things, the goals and specifics, but also leaving it open enough so that the council member that's sitting in my place 10 years from now will be able to go forward too. That we're seeing it in that vision piece.
Well, this is more an aspirational thing of how you want to be in the many years. Council, the next council in 2 years is going to do their own.
They are.
But it's,
Or to have them 20 years from now, right now.
yeah, right. And this is our vision for.
And that's one of the things that came out during the individual conversations of continuity. Sure, and so I already talked about in the council of 60 years, right? Parks change, so.
Yeah, and right now we're planting trees that someone else will water.
So one quick side note, so in Morgan Hill, we built our first downtown parking garage. So same thing, want to maintain small farm field, et cetera, in Silicon Valley. And we had a local artist decide to put a tarantula on the building. And so that became like 100+ people at the meetings. And the first person that stood up came up and said, "I'm here to speak for the tarantula, because the tarantula has no voice." So it's always quoted. All right, so what we're gonna do is take what the counselor laid out for us as your main pillars. And get all this assembled somehow under those pillars for all of you. And that will come back in a high level report that Bill will get. Probably set these out kind of ASAP, so you can kind of think of the big picture. And then you can use that as kind of that starting point, as we talked about. The mayor made a reference to the vision statement that we had up there that seemed to resonate with you. So today wasn't about changing that, but really kind of looking at what's in your current documents and now the current council bringing forward your values, which you've just done through these different pillars. And then the last thing we have to do before Ashley, she looks like she's getting all excited to get up here, is any specific budget related priorities. So I think, Bill, I don't want to speak for you, but there's a lot of stuff you're going to get that are going to give you indications of what the council's interested in. But anything specifically that council wants to share, questions you may have, or others for the council, because that's an important, urgent next step for all of you. So pause there. Anything you want to say before the council shares thoughts, or what you've heard today would influence the budget?
Not really. I mean, I guess, well, one thing I guess I would say is that I'm looking into it a bit. What I would say is, you know, we're kind of at as you're thinking about priorities and you're thinking about, you know, sustainably funding new things or maintaining funding for existing things. We are at an interesting inflection point for for the city right now. Because probably in about a year, Brindle is going to be completely built out. And so our population growth and our tax revenue growth is actually about to level off in this budget cycle that you all will be going through, or, you know, the next biennium. And so now's the time really to emphasize that whole point of stewardship and sustainably funded things, because you're going to be thinking about new services or enhanced services in an environment where after next year, there's no more rapid growth in tax revenue. You're really needing to think about, you're truly needing to think about
Cutting.
not cutting. But but as you're thinking about enhancing or doing things differently, you really need to make sure that it's a sustainable decision, because we really are about to level off in terms of our growth.
Fair to say that during the budget process, you're going to be sharing projections.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, so the council will see that. But absolutely.
And so we're in a nice place where we can we're at the mountaintop in a way, where we can kind of say, okay, here's where we are. There's not a whole bunch more growth that we have to deal with coming our way. But that also means that if we decide to do this, and this, in addition to what we're already doing, we need to be really sure those are priorities, because we aren't going to have growth in tax revenue from new population coming in to kind of help us do it. And if we don't think in this sustainable manner, we're going to be like Beaverton and Whatcom County and all these other agencies that are having to cut because they didn't look at it this way. They just kept growing services in some ways. So we're at an important place, is what I would say.
So from a budget perspective, I think something that I would encourage us all to think about is, as a council, we shouldn't be telling, I mean, obviously we gotta do the budget and all that stuff. But it's not necessarily for us to say, well, you need this many more employees in this department. It's for us to say, these are the city's long-term priorities. So whether it's, you know, whatever departments it is. And then to say, but Walsh's point, grants are finite. They end after a certain period. Same thing with levies. We can do a levy. All right, and by the way, you gotta go sell it to the voters. Fine. We have to figure out what is important, because there are areas where we may have to grow in order to keep up with demand. But either you have to pass more taxes, raise more fees, or cut more budget somewhere else. And we have to be very responsible and very careful, because we should all be thinking in 50-year increments. We shouldn't be thinking about 2-year budgets. We should be thinking about what is the impact on the 50-year budget cycle. That's my opinion, but that's what I'd ask us to think about, is what buckets are the most critical, and what services are we willing to tell voters, if you want that, you're gonna have to pay for it. And I'm okay with that, going out and knocking on doors, telling people we're gonna raise your property taxes if you want this service, as long as there's 6 other people with me, because I don't want to be shot at.
Right.
And
not only that, but the taxes are pretty much flat. They go a few percent a year.
Yeah.
However, the police officers are $100 an hour. And that goes up 5% a year.
Yeah.
So you want, I want more cops. Okay. So it goes in the library. What are we gonna do? Right? So that kind of stuff, right?
I'll say also, we have a city manager who's going to bring us that budget, and I think that's important to remember, because as much as I appreciate each of the unique qualities of all of our staff, some are going to be more vocal to you about their budget needs and some aren't. And so you don't necessarily know. And so I think that's important to remember too. It's, and that comes from my parenting mode. You have to tell them all, they can't have any Nike shoes, I'm sorry. But, it's not just the loudest voice that gets that, or the most charming little child. So, just, and I don't mean that in reference to anyone, that's just my own children. Yeah. So, I think it's important to remember that that's the conversations they're going to be having. But if we set the vision saying, hey, we want it to be sustainable and we want it to be supported if you're going to be doing these things. And we want to make sure that it creates more of an inclusive, connected community, then, that gives them the big light at the end of the tunnel to be aiming for.
Can I just point out a staff perspective when we talk about budget and stuff? We talked about wanting to keep taxes low and things affordable and sustainable economy in the city. At the same kind of breath, we hear from the majority council, this idea of like no growth, right? This whole anti-UGB movement. And so that kind of, not to kind of bring it to the three-letter word in it, but that kind of sends a message is kind of a little bit hard to wrap your mind around when we see kind of how thin things are. And obviously we can't squeeze blood from a turnip and make more money to show because our property taxes are the way they are. We don't necessarily want to, or like the idea of increasing property taxes on people who whatever. The same token, we talk about, you don't necessarily want to grow, expand our UGB, knowing what we currently have is what we have, so.
A couple of small houses, you know.
Yeah, so it's that, it's kind of hard to see and wrap your mind around, okay, what would we be thinking about then? We hear all this stuff about fiscal responsibility and sustainable and work with what we have and not wanting to raise taxes and keep it affordable, and we can't grow, but the cost of services are going up. How does that, those two conversations align?
I think maybe, at least just speaking for myself, one of the biggest misconceptions and those opportunities to communicate better is the concept that if somebody who was recently elected is not pro UGB for the 867 acres, that means no growth. And that could not be further from the truth that, you know, we have to grow, but we have to grow in a sensible, measured way. You know, so no growth is not anybody's that I'm aware of actual position or actual intent. It is a matter of how do we collaboratively decide what kind of growth makes sense and benefits our community.
Yeah, I just want to say, Nick, that also, you gotta give us some time, because we haven't had that conversation yet.
Yeah, that's,
You know, here it is, here's what you have, what can you do with it?
Yeah.
You know, so we're all getting there.
Yeah,
But we understand the question is in that oddity.
I think it's similar, if you saw it on the themes. Under, you know, what does growth look like? Define growth, that came out in all different conversations, so everyone acknowledging there will be growth, that one of them. So, yeah, maybe it's a first step. So, you suggested a few minutes back about, you feel like the pillars probably provide the direction, and now we get to the how. City manager and team start filling that in. There's a variety of things in here, the themes are there. Does the council feel comfortable, and Bill, do you feel comfortable that you got a gist from this conversation, you get a sense of ideas that you'll have to advance the council's pillars that they came up with?
Oh, yeah, no,
Understanding all the fiscal constraints and everything.
No, this has been great. Yes, the answer is yes. There's a lot of info and conversation here that it's been a challenge to really in a substantial way even kind of move forward with budget process, honestly. We've met, we've been working on figuring out how to pay for existing levels of service without knowing and existing things, just maintaining what we have. And we've been waiting to kind of hear you all kind of work through what you're thinking, looking forward about how things might change or what you want to see moving forward. So this has been great. So the answer is yes. And we can always talk about it, you know, we can kind of always talk about it more, particularly after kind of seeing how you pull it all together. So this is good.
So a couple thoughts on my end. First of all, I don't want to move away from the budget conversation because I did have some specifics that I wanted to mention, but I love everything that we have done here today. My question back to you, Steve, is how do we circle back and kind of review the note taking that you've done and how this is going to be summarized, so that we can review it if there's continued discussion that's needed, because, you know, I don't think we're quite at the point of having gelled on this is something we all perfectly love. So I think a little more dialogue is probably needed. And then how we would adopt that for staff to align all of this budget priority to. So how do we move forward on that in a timely manner, given that it is budget season, and get us all able to have this thoughtful kind of discussion about it?
So when Bill approached me, I shared kind of the outcome of this would be pulling together all this information in kind of a high level format, probably like a slide deck format. I'll just go through all this. We'll get that to Bill. It'll have to be this week. And so he'll have it this week to share it with all of you. Obviously, internal conversation, I would suggest that you review it. If you feel like there's, additional conversation you need as a team and you all talk about how we come together, it could be that workshop format that you can pull together and continue to have the dialogue of what it looks like. And then, we're gonna talk about next steps here, but it may be let that resonate first and then have a next step conversation. Because I think it's important that you can kind of think through, there's a lot of information you shared today. And so then go from there. I think the next step that I've heard just kind of in broad terms is, this is moving in the right direction. We have a budget coming that needs to reflect some of the conversation you've had today. But then what, how does the team building continue? Does the council look for more conversations around that, like you did this morning? How does that sound to everyone, or other things that others need?
This is my personal viewpoint. I'm really uncomfortable making a 2-year budget with the audits not up to date at the moment. And so I didn't know if it was something the council we could discuss, maybe just doing a 1-year budget, especially now I didn't even factor in the fact that Bryn Hill is going to be, built out. That would change the following year. Like do a 1-year budget and then revisit it in a year and go back to the 2-year cycle, but just with let's get our audits caught up.
We have some major federal funding question marks. I actually have that in my notes to say something similar. So sorry, piggybacking onto you. I wonder whether maybe we can write that down as a potential opportunity.
That's the 1-year budget?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then go back to 2-year or whatever we decide.
I don't understand what's the fear of the 2-year budget, since most of it, there's a lot of advantage for staff in terms of a 2-year budget, just in terms of the amount of work that they have to do right now, and you have to do every year annually, just the work. You're talking about what goes into the budget, but it allows for a longer, more thoughtful planning in some ways that 1-year budgets don't, because it's just kind of a quick turnover to. So is the worry that the audits, which I'm assuming are outside audits, is the worry that the audits aren't happening, and you're afraid that they're going to find something that would change those budget numbers? I'm not getting the connection between why to make it 1 year versus 2.
Well, just for Katie answered your part of it, but I think my reasons are actually different.
Just for this year, I feel like because we're not caught up with our audits and we won't be by the time we have to make the budget, it's enough behind that really don't know your numbers. To make it, and then to do a 2-year, if we could just do a 1 year and then fall back to the 2-year, especially getting caught up with the Bryn Hill build out audits.
So you do know your numbers. Your audit is just your checking of your numbers. You know your numbers the whole way. It is the outside check to make sure that you are actually, your numbers are correct.
It's budget.
It doesn't change what you know in terms of money. Unless there's some major.
If there's this major, this means somebody's gonna go to jail.
Yeah.
It's.
If I may, and I don't want to get stuck on this one item, it's really just a question, and then let's talk more about philosophy. But I think my reasoning for questioning whether a 1-year budget makes sense is more strategic, that we have all of this newness and churn, and we just literally on that whiteboard defined for staff what we would like them to do right now on March 16th, which is pretty late in budget cycle. We are down a finance manager. We have 5 new members of council, and there's all of this federal uncertainty, et cetera, et cetera. Would it make sense for us to be smart, do the best we can for 1 year, and have a little longer runway to really, some of the things on my notes list are, critically evaluate the status quo, and just because we've always structured the budget this way, do we necessarily have ways to optimize and automate and leverage technology to, for example, save Dustin some money? If we have a little more time to plan and look at that opportunity pipeline and how it affects the budget, then potentially we can be more effective with the same limited funds.
For 2.
Yeah.
So if we're doing, one is we're not doing the budget. We're going to be looking at it and overseeing. We set the big vision for it, which isn't very different from the last vision. So I guess my question would be to Bill, who is doing the budget and is working with staff on all of their budget pieces for the budget. How do you feel about that in terms of having that this year, we're not gonna go in and take it out and change the whole thing. What we do is set a goal, which we do right here, and then, what can be accomplished or can't be accomplished. It's their job to figure out where to make cuts and do those things, not for us to get in and sort of noodle it.
So maybe,
So my question would be to Bill.
maybe a piggyback question onto yours is trying to approach it from a different direction is if we were baking a 2-year budget as quickly with all of this churn as I was talking about, how difficult is it to adjust if we needed to?
So, no, these are all great questions. So there is more work in doing a biennial budget, because really at the end of the day, embedded in a biennial budget are 2 one-year budgets in there. But the nice thing about a biennial budget is the additional time doing the second year isn't as big of a deal as the process for doing one-year budgets. There's still a little bit more work. The nice thing about doing the 2-year budget process is that it gives departments the ability to kind of more sustainably plan how they're going to roll out services or do differently, particularly for a growing agency, a growing community. As far as changing things, I mean, it's just a supplemental budget. That's a resolution you all would consider at any time. We can do that. Anecdotally, just kind of as an example, a number of years ago, remember I was talking about how in the past, if you were city council and it was kind of a bizarre time.
Yep.
There was a time way a long time ago, when there wasn't a budget, there wasn't a budget ready in June and nobody had asked the question. And you have to adopt before July 1. And so a 1-year budget this was a number of years ago, but I'm aware it happened. A 1-year budget was pulled together for purposes of passing it, checked all the boxes by Oregon budget law, but then after July 1, it was fleshed out. So passing a budget, the process is important. A biennial budget allows, you all to kind of let the city operate kind of on its own legs, with some time to plan and work through a 2-year process. But, from my opinion, the other thing about the audits. So I would agree that the audit process, the audits that are, the FY22 audit is on the verge. I think you probably saw in the agenda packet that we met this week with our financial consultants and audit consultant, or auditor. And the audit basically just kind of checks all the information year to year. It checks transactions and makes sure processes were followed. I'm not aware that we've had an audit where anybody found anything major. Kind of just we aren't complicated enough for there to be a bunch of moving parts for there to be serious problems. Usually, but when we do have audits, it's basically just checking the existing numbers, make sure we did everything correctly. And if we didn't, you hear about it. Those are what are called findings. Having the audits done or won't significantly change how we set up our budget for the next 2 years, because it's based on. A budget is always based on 2 budget time periods, the existing budget time period, and then you project forward based on all those years before. By Oregon law, you have to take into account and report 2 prior budget periods. So you kind of have to trace through all of your numbers over a 3 or 4 year period at the end of the day if you're a biennial budget. So I do as you feel and go in what direction, but I wouldn't let the budget decision hinge on the status of the audits, I would say, would be my advice.
One thing on the audits, so I read through the audits, it's all controls, it's not actual budget issues that I found.
Yeah.
According to the auditor, so the controls are pretty normal, we go through this work all the time. It's not ideal, it'd be great if we didn't have audits where we got fixed up, but we'll get that result. I'm not too concerned about that after reading through the 2022 and what I've seen from the auditor. What I would say on the budget though, the way it was explained at the Department of Revenue training for budget for this year, this FY, or biennium or whatever. All we're doing as a budget committee and a city council is saying, this is how much money we're putting into each department dish. And then there's ways to move money around within those. And there was 3 buckets, and I apologize, I don't remember, I have it written down. It's hard to remember all this. But yeah, we can move money within those buckets, and there are specific ways within the process, within the law, that we're allowed to do these. So whether we do it annual or biannual doesn't really have a major impact, because things will change, and then we'll just move money based off of what we need to do. So I don't know that going to a 1-year budget is going to solve anything. It's just going to create a lot more churn. And we're going to deal with the budget committee twice in 2 years. And if you've ever been on a budget committee in any function,
It's arduous.
it's not fun. I've done it for churches and I've done it for companies, and it's not fun. So I'm just saying, if we can get it done, it's one of those things we might have to adjust some things later, but it's not life threatening if we have stuff we're gonna move money.
We can make changes. So let's say that there's some other priority that comes up or some other opportunity that comes up. And we need to look at a way to move money around to do that. That happens in a resolution in council meeting, where I don't even know what it takes then to change from, we decided to go, the city decided to go to a 2-year budget, was that an ordinance? I'm just going, what's the process to go to a 1-year budget? And the staff has already been working towards a 2-year budget. So why, sort of put them back in the driving seat to start over again,
So
I just want to say something. I used to run my own department. Companies, Port of Vancouver. When I was in the communications department and the budget time, knowing that I had 2 years to plan on down and big things happen, you would have to start ahead of time, especially in communications. I'm sure in every department. If there's a big project, let's say 2 years from now, you have to start procuring things for that project now. And you need money for that now. So having that certainty in your mind when you're planning, it's really important for people who make those departments to have that certainty.
So being sensitive to Ashley and needing to have time for your portion of content, do we want to maybe move away from the specifics on the 1 versus 2 and get those higher level, like budget concept priority type conversation that we were trying to suss out, to give that information to staff? Maybe Steve would kind of cross the point of, if there's not time to record it now, you might review the YouTube and transcribe it later, and everybody just kind of get their words out and on record for what we wanted to say. Does that sound?
Council,
We're talking about budget again, or where are we at now?
anything that hasn't been shared? So, like I said, Bill and team, I think, have absorbed a lot of this, but there's things that you want to make sure the council or the team hears.
Yeah.
You're right. So from a time standpoint, we're at 2:30, probably need a couple minute break and then jump in.
I mean, I'm wondering if it makes sense to make it an agenda item discussion where we simply say, you've gotten your priorities, but you've gotten your region back, or settled on it or close. And then to say, let's have an agenda discussion to talk about the big picture priorities for the budget, and have that happen just on an agenda item in a council meeting, because I feel like it's a bigger discussion that we're going to be able to have in a few minutes with a break. And I'd also like the opportunity to just sort of let the rest of the stuff we said today just kind of sink in terms of that vision, and those priorities. So I don't know how others feel about that.
I haven't been tracking who's spoken and who hasn't, but this is I will say, recorded or not, a different dynamic and a different feeling in the room, as far as I've heard everybody speak up today, and I am so impressed by that. Does everybody feel like we're going to the same kind of discussion in a future meeting?
I think the assembly have here is better for discussion than us all in a line.
Yeah, I absolutely
I
agree
can
with
actually
that.
see you.
I know.
I don't know what's going on over there, right?
I know. This is
So-
something I've been talking about for a while, of like the format of
Right.
make our meeting space work for a collaborative team. Like, this is amazing. I can look at both of you. Oh my God.
And before can we see it, like, somebody over there is saying something, you know?
No, I love this.
So Mayor, I think what you're getting at is, does everyone feel like they've shared their thoughts for today?
Yeah, which I heard positive feedback on the format, and yes, please, I hope every city council meeting will be shaped like this, but did everybody get to say what they wanted to say? I know I've got my list, but like, are we going to bring it up and feel comfortable when there's different people in the room? And we've been talking about different stuff that maybe we didn't agree on as much right beforehand. Are we gonna be able to have a good quality conversation, or should we take 5 more minutes, rattle off our list, and then get to training?
Let's get the training.
Yeah, we need to move on to training, so already, but we.
I think it's scary. We talked about it earlier, why it's scary. But I think we have to get our feet wet doing it at some point. So why not do it on a conversation where we already have the background for and that we're gonna walk into? And remember everything we said here today about being supportive of one another and being allies, working together to solve that budget agenda item.
All right, but let's give yourselves a hand. You spent a lot of time today. It's been an active day. You covered a lot of ground, like we said. So we'll work on, getting the next part set up for Ashley. All this will come back to you in a format and the cycle that's there, and then take your next steps. It sounds like one of the ideas then is potentially having an agenda item or a workshop type item to talk more about this. All right, Ashley, we'll get you set up.
of the training, I wanted to take a moment to introduce myself and my role a little bit. I should have been meeting not too long ago. And I wanted to take this opportunity to kind of let you know a little bit who I am, what my background is. And I think that's going to inform a little bit of what we're talking about today, because there's some of what I'm going to go over is just the law and how things work. And I'm also going to provide some suggestions on, from my observation of my experience, different things the council can try to be even more efficient and effective. And I want to kind of let you know where some of those comments are. So my name is Ashley Driscoll. I am actually born and raised in unincorporated Washington, D.C. I'm a Cedar Mill lady of the 80s and 90s. I was one of the first graduating classes of women at Jesuit. And then I went to the East Coast for college, came back for law school, and then started working in local government. So I've spent my entire legal career representing local government. I came over to BH in 2014 after meeting Chad, who I know you guys have worked with at a council meeting in the metropolis of Sutherland. I'm sure you guys have all heard of it, driving down I-5. I became a partner in September of 2019. And I continue in that role today. So BH represents, I think at this point, 25 cities, from Hillsborough and Corvallis all the way down to Cannon Beach is actually our smallest by population, but they punch above their weight in terms of a lot of legal issues. So I have, in those, 12 years, I've attended city council meetings. I've gone through a lot of different, different issues, both legal and process with different city councils. I've been seeing things work really well and, seeing things that could improve. I would say every city council goes through, ebbs and flows in terms of, effectiveness and efficiency. And I think especially a council like yours that, I think I heard, and it didn't strike me until I heard it today, 5 new council members on it. So today's presentation is really City Council 101. And for some of you, I understand that this is going to be pretty remedial, that these are things that you already know and already understand. But I think talking about some of these issues as a full body and understanding the process how the process is set up at the city, the things that are dictated by your charter and can't be changed, and then the things that are not. And, also from my perspective, and I'm not going to ask, both Steve and Bill to come in too, if there is an opportunity to make a decision, how have other cities across the state kind of solved some of these sticky issues and struck a balance and what you guys have to place, and then talk about whether or not, I also have a lot of slides in the end on government ethics. If we get there, and I'm kind of not confident we will, we get there, but if not, that's fine too. I put them in there not knowing just sort of how quickly we would move. If we don't get there, we can do those another time. So I'm gonna go until 4 and hopefully we've gotten through all the North Plains specific issues, and then, we can talk about scheduling another time. So in terms of my agenda for today, we're going to spend, a decent amount of time in the form of government. We're going to look at your city's charter. We're going to look at your municipal code, the section chapter 30 that talks about your council rules. We're going to talk about the council rules that the city has in place now. A lot of what I'm going to talk about today is informed by all my conversations with each one of you. So thanks for making time. And there was a lot of discussion about what did or did not change in December of 2024. And so I'm going to touch on that too. I put a bunch of documents in front of you. I already outed myself and my age. I'm a paper person. So I have your current council rules in front of you. The ordinances and resolutions that made the changes in December. I also have the current municipal code that talks about your council rules, just so you have those documents in front of you. If you have a binder, like, again, kind of a dinosaur, I do, you can put those in there and then go. I will be taking, questions as we go. Again, I think the most important part is to get sort of the first half of the presentation done. So let's really start at the beginning. In Oregon, most cities are home rule jurisdictions, and what it means to be a home rule jurisdiction is that the voters are provided the opportunity to choose their own form of government. So they do that by the voters adopting a city charter. And the type of city charter that the voters of North Plains have enacted is a council manager form of government. So this means that individual councilors and the mayor have no independent authority to act on behalf of the city. If an individual councilor or mayor is seeking to act, they have to find a document that provides them, that delegates the authority to them. So this kind of form of government, where you have a council manager form of government, it's a division of authority. So the council is authorized to act in some ways on behalf of the city, and the city manager is authorized to act on other types of authority within the city. And although the city manager the council oversees the city manager in the performance of his duties, and I'm just going to say him throughout the day because that's easiest, but their performance of their duties. The council should not interfere with the day-to-day administrative functions of the city manager. And that's the structure that your voters adopted. And so if there's any changes to your form of government, those changes actually have to be approved by voters. So by kind of respecting the form of government that you guys have, you're respecting the will of the voters.
What other kinds of government are there?
There's very few in Oregon that aren't a council manager form of government. There's a council form of government where the council actually acts as both policy setting and administrative.
Portland did that and it failed so bad.
There's a reason why most of the council manager form of government, I have one city, the metropolis of Hubbard is that form of government. And, for a city that size, I would say it works, but they recently have a city administrator not amending the form of government, but because of, some of the difficulties of that form of government.
What about the strong mayor?
And then there's a strong mayor form of government. And those are the ones that are common in Oregon. Steve, can you think of any other types of government in Oregon?
Those are the main ones.
Yep. So, when I look at your guys' city charter, it looks very, very similar to a lot of the other cities throughout Oregon. Most base their city charters. I'm still on this. Could you go back up?
Oh, that one?
Yep, still on this one.
Sorry.
Sorry, I'm not moving super quickly, which is why I'm not confident we're gonna get to the end here. So your city charter looks a lot like the other city charters for most of my other clients. When I look at it, I know that there's some changes that you guys have made, Hillsborough has wards and districts. You guys don't have wards and districts. That's a big one. How you deal with vacancies. That's an area that I would look to for differences, but more or less, you guys have the same governing document as the city of Forest Grove, who's another one of our clients, the city of Silverton, I was going to say Hubbard, but that's not true. But by and large, most cities in Oregon have some sort of deviation of the League of Oregon Cities model charter. So some of the issues we're talking about today are really not isolated within the city of North Plains. You can look to other jurisdictions to see how they have solved these types of problems because they have the same governing document. And one of the other things that your charter does, like most charter does, is that it gives the city all the power and authority allowed by law. In Oregon, the cities that are home rule jurisdictions have a lot of authority. So the best way to think about it is for jurisdictions in Oregon, it's a tell me where I can't and sort of show me where I can do it. So if you come up to me and you say, can we pass this sort of tax? I don't have to look in state law to see where you're authorized to do it. I have to see that if you're preempted by state or federal law. So you as a city council have a lot of authority to make decisions for local control for the people within your jurisdiction. The only times that I would say that you can't do something is if you're preempted by state or federal law.
What about county?
So it's within your jurisdiction. There's some interplay between, the county and the city, but generally speaking, the county can't tell the city what it can and can't do. All right, now I'm finally ready. So you have the council, council sends the general policy, the city manager enacts that policy. And then, again, this is my attempt here at some graphics. You got your city charter, which is at the top of your pyramid here. And all other city documents have to be consistent with your city charter. Again, it's passed by the voters. You have to make sure that everything that you do is consistent with the form of government that the city charter is laid out. So your city code has to be consistent with your city charter. And then all other city documents have to be consistent with both those two other documents. You can't have a resolution or a policy that is in conflict with your municipal code. So that's sort of the hierarchy of all the documents that the city has, and there's different ways your charter lays out different processes for changing this different level hierarchy. Again, if you want to amend your city charter, you have to go to the voters and get that approved by voters. If you want to amend your city code, you have to do that via ordinance. And adopting an ordinance, if you've taken a look at your city charter, requires additional process before the changes can be enacted. And I saw an email from Councilor Wallace the other day, and something hit me in it, and I think it's really true that a lot of this process is intentionally slow. And especially when enacting ordinances, it's to give the public an opportunity to see what local government's doing and to provide input. So especially when you are changing your local code, there are additional processes to make sure that that is posted publicly, that it's enacted at 2 meetings unless certain conditions are made, in order to give the public the opportunity to give you feedback on that. For other documents such as resolutions and orders, your charter dictates how you adopt those, but the process is a lot more streamlined. It can be at 1 meeting. There isn't as much of a criteria for being public posting, because those tend to be more administrative documents or the result of a quasi judicial hearing. Their impact is not, I would say, as significant as amending your code. All right, next slide. So I am going to go over the key provisions of your charter, and this is specific to the city of North Plains, although again, very similar to many other cities in Oregon. Chapter 2 goes over the powers. As I talked about, you have a homeroom charter that reserves all the power to the city council, unless delegated within the charter, for instance, to the city manager, the city attorney, the municipal judge, or preempted by state or federal law. Your particular council is comprised of 6 councilors and a mayor. The mayor's duties under the charter are, pretty circumscribed. So how is a mayor different from any other individual member of the council? Not really, very different. So the mayor presides over council meetings. They usually vote. You guys have a provision in your charter that is unusual to the city of North Plains, which is when you're electing a new councilor, you're filling a vacancy. The mayor only votes in the case of a tie. That's different than most of my cities. So the mayor usually votes, the mayor signs all council decisions and acts as the political head of the city. Other than that, the mayor is what we call, a leader among equals. So the mayor doesn't have any additional power unless specifically delegated to the mayor by the council to act, to take any action on behalf of the city. The council president presides over the city council meetings when the mayor is not available. We're going to be talking a lot about your council rules today, but your charter dictates that you have to adopt them, and that's why you have them. One of the many reasons why you adopt them. Another way that some cities are different is they define a quorum differently. Yours is defined as a majority of the council members. Something to note is that your council is defined as 6 councilors and a mayor. That's regardless of whether those seats are filled. So if you have vacancies, your definition of quorum hasn't changed. So unless otherwise required by charter, all votes require a majority of a quorum. So if you have a quorum, you can meet to have a meeting. Take any council business that's before the council at that meeting requires a majority of that quorum. There are a couple places in the charter that require a majority of the council, and that's, for instance, appointing and removing the city manager. All right, next slide. We're cruising a little bit more now. The rest of the I just want to go through, the charter is such an important document to the
Let's
city.
quorum a little bit more to get more clarification. So quorum is 4 in our case.
Yes.
Does that mean 4 people have to show up in order to have a city council meeting?
Yes.
What if somebody's over Zoom? We're allowed to do that, correct?
So that is determined by your council rules. That's not addressed in the city charter. So a lot of my cities are addressing whether present means physically present or virtually present. And that matters in terms of absences as well.
let's say there's a vote that takes place, and only 4 people show up, we're gonna have a vote. 3 people say yes, 1 person says no. Does the quorum need to be unanimous if it's a quorum of 4?
It just has to be majority of the vote.
Okay.
So chapters 4, 5, and 6 talk about how I mentioned a little bit, different types of decisions, legislative, which is amendments to your code, quasi judicial, which is when you're acting as a judge, you're resolving a dispute between 2 parties, administrative, when you are enacting administrative matters for policies that you've already passed. It also outlines elections, so that each one of you has a term that is determined by your city charter, your qualifications for the positions, vacancies and filling vacancies. Those are all determined by the charter. The charter also establishes officers. So you have a city attorney, which right now is Barry Holzner-Hammond, that is appointed by the council and reports directly to the council. So there's only 3 individuals that appoint directly to the council, or the council directly oversees. That's your city attorney, your municipal judge, and your city manager. So your municipal judge is appointed by council, and then once that person is appointed, they independently run the municipal court. So the council does not have the authority to say to the municipal judge, you need to rule this way in a certain dispute, because that power has been delegated to the municipal judge. If the municipal judge is making decisions that you don't agree with over time, what's your remedy? To remove a municipal judge. But what the council can't do is interfere with his or her decisions. And then you have a provision that the council can transfer some of these functions. I actually haven't asked this question, but I'm going to assume with the city of the size of North Plains, perhaps we have removed some of the, do we have a municipal judge appointed? No. Okay. It's allowed in your charter, so that's totally fine.
You don't be the judge.
And then the next one, and it's the one that impacts this council and every council the most, is the charter establishes the office of the city manager. And then we get the next slide, and then delegates really significant duties to the city manager. So again, we're talking about the council manager form of government. The council is the policy-making body. The city manager is then delegated the authority to do all of these tasks. And I didn't list all of them out. And so I kept the numbers just to show that there are additional tasks that are delegated to the city manager. But some of what I would think are the most important are to appoint, supervise, and remove city employees. They organize city departments and administrative structure. They prepare and administer the annual budget. They run city utilities and properties. I have the rest of them up there. I'll trust that you guys can all read them. The point of this slide is that the people of North Plains have said that the city manager is the person who's responsible for making decisions in these areas. So they have delegated that authority to the city manager. The council set policy, the city manager administers that policy by, running the day-to-day activities of the city.
What if you have somebody that says they want the city manager to have less authority because she only reside with elected people?
So this is in your charter. So if you want to take one of these job duties away from the city manager, you have to amend your charter, because the voters of the city of North Plains said these are the authorities that we have given to the city.
So it has to go to vote for
It has to go to vote. And so the city council as a body can't decide to take these decisions away from the city manager without being out of compliance with your charter.
And just abundance of clarification for community communication. It has been that way since 1960 something.
Whenever you guys adopted this charter, or something, yes, that's probably the latest version.
Yeah, I think it was in the 80s when they switched to.
I was just curious.
I looked at some history, but
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is one of the cornerstones of the city manager form of government, that it's a division of authority, that the city council is the policy-making body, and the city manager runs the day-to-day activities of the city. Let's go to the next slide. There's an entire provision in here that is called, we reference it as the non-interference clause. And almost every city in the entire state has something similar to this. And as elected members of the city council, there's very, 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 very few things that you can do to actually get removed from your role as an elected official, and interfering with the role of the city manager is one of them. So what this section says, and I put it in here in its entirety, is that no council member may directly or indirectly attempt to coerce the manager or candidate for the office of manager in the appointment or removal of city employees or an administrative decision regarding city property or contracts.
So what do you mean by candidate?
A candidate for city or for the city manager?
So if city manager gets terminated, for some reason, say on the condition of you being hired, I
Yeah,
would like
that's
to
exactly what's
really
prohibited by
look
this.
at the planning department.
Yeah.
Something like that, right?
That is prohibited.
Okay.
So violations of this prohibition are grounds for removal from office by majority of the council after a public hearing. Those are pretty powerful words. But then I think the next sentence is really important too. In council meetings, councilors may discuss or suggest anything with the city manager or manager relating to city business. So this does not mean that you can never raise concerns as council members about how things are functioning at the city. What this says is that if you have a concern about how the public works director is managing the public works department, you can't coerce the city manager in, I think this guy needs to be fired, outside of a council meeting, but you can certainly raise concerns to the city manager during a council meeting about anything relating to city business.
But I have to do it inside a council meeting.
Yeah, sorry.
I had to do it inside a council meeting. I can't say, copy, yeah, man. Geez, with no growth here, do we need extra city planner? I can't do that.
I mean, I would question, like, after a public hearing, are you trying to coerce the city manager in making a decision in something that has been authorized or delegated authority to him? That would be a fact question for the council, but as a city councilor, you should be like, this is the danger zone. Am I trying to coerce the city manager in making a decision within his realm of authority? And of course, if the city manager is not making decisions that you think are in the best interest of the city, that is your employee. That is a person that is a report, thank you, directly to the city council. So if you don't like the decisions that the city manager is making, that's a performance issue with the city manager. And that's something you deal with through the evaluation and potential removal of the city manager. So does that make sense? It's not like the city council doesn't have authority over, how the city's run. It's that your one employee is delegated the authority to make the administrative decisions.
And those decisions are the full body.
Yes, about the evaluation and selection of the city manager are 100% decisions of the full body.
Just clarifying question.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is, meant to stop us from doing something that none of us would have done anyway. But just for everyone's understanding, we're not saying that you can't have questions, that you can't request information. We're saying that there should not be influence over decision-making by the city manager, but you can always ask questions.
You can always ask questions, and we're gonna get to that, because the city manager is an independent, an independent authorization under the city charter that is separate from the city councils. And each individual city councilor acting on his or her own doesn't have any independent authority. You only have authority when you're acting as a body, unless you can point to some other delegation of authority. Like, it is possible for the council as a body to delegate authority to the mayor to work with, legal counsel in order to negotiate a contract with the city manager. That happens in my life on a daily basis. The authority, the mayor has been delegated that authority. When we're doing that, she's authorized to act. But if you can't, point to a document that says, I am authorized to do this as an individual on behalf of the city, then you're operating outside the authority as a city manager, as a councilor, and you're just a member of the public asking, city staff or something. And this is where we're gonna go into, like, these aren't issues unique to North Plains. On the other hand, we're gonna get to this, there has to be a balance. Because you're asked to come to city council meetings informed, it makes sense that maybe you do have questions before a city council meeting, or you would like some additional information in order to make this decision. That makes sense too. And so in your council rules, you strike that balance. You say that, we're gonna get to there in a couple slides, but it makes sense for each individual councilor to be able to ask questions of the city manager without the authorization for the rest of the council up to a certain threshold. Sometimes it's 1 hour. I think the League of Oregon Cities model charter, it's 2 hours. So as an individual councilor, you are delegated the authority over and above a member of the public to say to Bill, hey, I have a question about, this project that's important to me. And Bill's not expected to drop everything and answer your question. And it shouldn't be something that takes up days and days of Bill's time. But the council as a body has agreed that that makes sense for the effective and efficient operations of the city. So as long as you're, acting within that scope of authority, you're fine.
I want to clarify,
Yeah.
you can't go and ask the public works director or the city clerk or the person at the library desk or, other staff members to answer those questions for you.
So let's get there. So let's put a pause on that.
No problem.
Okay, so I think everybody understands sort of the basic structure and what this provision of the charter is directed at. Let's go to the next slide. And I put this slide in just so you know that there are other provisions of the charter that I didn't just not turn the page. There's 9, 10, 11 personnel, which is that city council sets compensation and adopts merit systems for the employees of the city. But really, other than that, city employees report to the city manager and the city manager reports to the city council. So the city council does not directly supervise any other member of the city staff. Public improvements and miscellaneous. Okay, so if you recall, the charter requires you guys to adopt council rules because the charter is pretty thin on, how exactly the council functions. And so the charter rules are designed to step in and fill some of those gaps. So your council rules are to usually establish how council meetings will be governed, how appointments will be made, how council members are to interact with themselves and city employees. And then through the council rules, the council might delegate authority to any member, including the mayor, to have additional responsibilities and authorizations. So again, when acting as an individual member of council, you need to look at where's my authorization? And a lot of times, especially additional authorization for the mayor to act on behalf of the city comes through the council rules. So because this came up a bunch in my conversations, like what were the changes that were made in December 2024? So from my review, my independent review of sort of what happened, prior to December 2024, North Plains had your council rules in your municipal code. That's actually not what I would recommend. It's not what anybody, BEH would recommend. And the idea is that council rules sometimes need to be flexible and you need to be able to change the council rules that are not dictated by your charter or state and federal law. Some of the choices that you've made as a council, you have to have some flexibility in them. Because things come up at council meetings that, you may want to be flexible with. Like, let's say that you guys had a rule that your council meetings had to end at 9:30. If that's in your municipal code, if you have a council meeting going at 9:45 at night, as I've attended a few of yours, I know sometimes they do, you're officially out of compliance with your own code. But if you had that same rule in council rules that are adopted by resolution, you can pass a motion that day and, either suspend the council rules or suspend that provision of the council rules to be able to continue without being out of compliance with your municipal code. So let's go to the next page. So from my understanding, that's exactly what happened in December of 2024. I'm assuming, I didn't talk to Chris, but we recommend that city councils adopt their council rules via resolution rather than ordinance because that provides council flexibility in working with those rules. So in December 2024, North Plains repealed many of the sections that were in your municipal code that included the council rules and instead replaced them in part with resolution 2285, which adopted your current council rules. And again, I read your current council rules. I read the LOC model charter council rules. I read many jurisdictions council rules. They're pretty run of the mill. Again, like each city gets to make some of these choices for themselves, but there's nothing out of the ordinary of the current council rules that you guys have in place right now. And at that same meeting, the council passed ordinance 498 that aligned the city manager job description with the city manager's authority under the charter. So previously, you guys had a section of your municipal code that went over what the city manager's duties were. That is not common. Did City of Tiger do that? Have it in municipal code? No, again, because some of those things need to be flexible and they need to change, the municipal code's not the appropriate place for them. And my understanding was they were pretty outdated. So instead of having this, area of your code that you're gonna have to update via ordinance every time you want to change the duties that are assigned to the city manager, what the city did is just removed that area of the municipal code that outlined the city manager's duties and said the city manager will have the responsibilities that the city manager has been authorized to have under the city charter. In my opinion, much better way to do that. All right, next page. So there are some council rules that are still in your municipal code. And again, I talked to every one of you, so there were some questions that most of you asked. And so I've highlighted some of the areas we're gonna go over, but the council rules that are still in your municipal code, go over these items. I'm not gonna read all of them, but essentially they are items that are also covered by your city charter. They do include agenda, consent agenda, and order of business, and they do include requests for staff assistance, which Councilor McCall Wallace was asking about. Next slide. So your newly adopted council rules also cover some of these same areas. So the council rules, again, like they answer a lot of the questions that you may have about how should our meetings be functioning. And so they talk about, the types of meetings and who can call them. Rules for attendance that just came up regarding is virtual attendance. Are you present at the council meeting? A lot of what I see from my cities right now are dealing with that specific issue. Are we going to require city councilors to be in person to be attending the city council meeting? Not to go on a divergent with that, but there's some ADA concerns there. So most are saying that virtual attendance is attendance. You can vote if you're virtually attending. How the council agrees to interact, how items are added to the council agenda. This is a big one. I'm gonna have a slide on that, so I'll pause that. So how items get added to the agenda, how council agrees to interact with each other and with staff, communications with staff, legal advice. These are all answered in the current council rules. Okay, so let's get to one of the questions that came up a lot during my conversations, which is who has the authority to add items to the agenda? So it's addressed in two places. It's addressed both in your municipal code under section 30.05, and then it's also addressed in two different sections of your council rules. So generally speaking, I'm going to get into this a little bit more, but generally speaking, you want something added to the agenda. Your first stop is to ask the city manager. Hey, city manager, I think it would be a great idea to add, what were we just talking about? The budget visioning to our agenda. The city manager, who's the head of the administrative, arm of the city, can say, yes, I agree with that. I was thinking about that too. I'm going to add that to the agenda. But it could be that the city manager doesn't agree or questions whether the full council as a body wants that item to be on the agenda. So it could be that the city manager says, I think we need to raise that at a city council meeting to make sure that the entire council wants to see that item on the agenda, because you are 7 people. If each one of you was able to go up to Bill and say, I want these 5 items on the agenda, we would be here to midnight every single night, going over your agenda. So there has to be some sort of guardrails and process about how items get on the agenda. So you guys have answered that through your council rules. Your council rules say the city manager sets the agenda. Members of the council may request items get added either at a council meeting or to the city manager. If raised at a council meeting, council should reach consensus that the item is necessary. And again, as an individual council member, you don't have any authority unless you're acting as a body. So you have a pet project that you really want the city to, to look at a council meeting. Your fellow councilors, a majority of a quorum, need to also agree with you that they want to spend their time talking about that on a future agenda item. So just practical advice, if you want something added to the agenda during council comments, great time to bring that up. Say, I would like, this part added to the agenda. Everybody agreed that a majority of the folks there agreed that they also think that's worth an agenda item. And then you could also say to the city manager, this is the information I would also like in the packet when we consider that. And then the body has given direction to the city manager to add that item to, you know, an upcoming agenda. So that's how that process works here at the city of North Plains and here at most cities across the state. So that's not the only way to do it. You know, some cities do delegate authority to, you know, the mayor to just add items to the agenda that the mayor wants. That's, you know, some councils have decided that, or some councils have decided you need at least 2 members of the council to add an item to the agenda. So if you wanted to change that in the city of North Plains, you know, if you wanted to change mayor, city manager, you'd have to pass an ordinance, change your municipal code. And if you wanted to change, you know, the delegation of authority to the city manager to be the general gatekeeper of the agenda, you can also change that by resolution because that's been adopted in your council rules.
Clarifying question. Thank you so much for explaining how to raise an agenda item in a city council meeting. Is there, I'm just basing this on what I understand and what we've experienced of the agenda setting cycle for North Plains. And, you know, it's due the Wednesday before the city council meeting, and when that process gets usually started and, you know, Bill and team are refining what's going to be on the agenda. This ends up being less of a conversation that we had 2 weeks beforehand, raising things, and more of a collecting them kind of the week before. Is there a method via email, whether it's opt-in or opt-out, to get that consensus?
So adding something to I'm not 100% sure I'm following your question, but something just raised.
Sure.
I mean, that's something that the council generally has to vote on and agree on. So, you know, I would highly advise not having those conversations outside of the council meeting, because you need a council majority to add something to the agenda. And so typically that is taken in some sort of vote. And so if you have that discussion outside of a council meeting, you're at risk of having a prohibited public meeting.
Fair enough. I think we're looking at, there have been kind of a solicitation from council for agenda items, and then a lack of clarity on how to carefully and within the boundaries of our requirements gather that consensus. Or, hey, if nobody says they disagree, do we assume consensus? What happens?
Normally what happens is this: the city manager and the mayor meet every week and talk about things. And they say, okay, the city has these things coming up. It's not a surprise, like, oh, trends fell quickly. Is that that? I mean, nobody things are not.
It's budget season, right?
Nobody things are not knee jerk, right? So you have a cadence of what needs to be discussed and done. Occasionally something jumps in. Occasionally, not like, Thursday at 4, generally something jumps in, right? And we have to quickly address that. Maybe with the work session, give everybody a heads up. And it'll come out through the city manager and, hey, by the way, the heads up, this thing just dropped in our lap. Very rare. Not like, okay, as a matter of course, things are dropping in your lap all the time. Very rare. Normally these things have a very nice flow to them, right? You can forecast what needs to happen and you discuss them.
I love the concept though of the weekly meeting with the city manager and the mayor. And I think even any kind of cadence of weekly meetings with staff is a fantastic step in the right direction.
So Mayor, I think that you brought it up, and I think it was answered in the charter or in the rule, is that, you know, if it's in a council meeting, you can bring it up in the report, your report. You say, hey, I'd like to add whatever, X, Y, and Z to the agenda item. And, you know, do we have consensus? You know, how do the others feel about that? Should we add this to the agenda? And if a majority says yes, then there's direction. Great. Are there any materials we need? Oh yeah, I want to have this report and this report with that. Okay, so let's direct the city manager. So that takes care of that way. But in between,
right,
I could go to Bill, for example, and it's the only person I go to. I go to Bill and I say, I want to add X, Y, Z to the agenda item. And Bill says, well, Petunia's in the park. That's, you know, I understand I support you. But I think maybe it's a council decision to see if that's really, you know, they want to have this in the agenda. So you should bring it up in the report, or you should take it to the meeting, and then it would get onto an agenda item, or maybe it would die in that moment because, you know, people want pansies and opportunities. I don't know. So, but that's that way. So as opposed to like, I have this agenda item and it's in between weeks and I take it there, you know, we can't go get consensus to then move it onto the agenda. But Bill could decide, oh, that has just come up. That is important, you know, but to put that forward on the agenda.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is maybe something for us to noodle about if we get to set our own council rules and we see that this is something that's happening. We put a process in place.
You can change it. But again, what I would caution against is there has to be a guardrail, and it can't be that every member of council, I mean, it can be if you want it to be. My advice is that it sets you up for some inefficiencies. If just everybody's allowed to say, Bill, I want this agenda item. There has to be, or my advice is that there needs to be a process and procedure.
From my perspective, I guess what I would welcome the council reports portion of the agenda to be a bit more explicitly agenda planning for the following meeting or two. Everything else that Ashley's covering points to, if you bring something up to be a new agenda item at a city council meeting, it's really all about how all of you feel about it. And if something comes up in between meetings, I don't know how you all feel about it as being a priority. I mean, because you didn't talk about it at the meeting. And if somebody comes and says, Bill, we forgot, Family Justice Center needs a proclamation at the next meeting. We forgot to put it on the agenda. We need a proclamation that says we pledge support as a city to the Washington County Family Justice Center. I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, I'll get that in there for you. That's great. But if somebody comes along and says, oh, something that's a bit more substantial in terms of city action, I don't know how much of a priority that is. Like, it's tough. It's like in a way, it shouldn't be my judgment call. It's you as a body. So there's kind of like the in-between meeting discussion of what should be on the agenda. I kind of lean on wanting to hear you all at council talk about it, so I know it's a priority. Because the other thing going on with this particular council right now is you all are diving into so many different things in detail. And there's just a lot of content and a lot of information that you're hungry for, and we're trying to get to you. And so what to add on top of all that is kind of tricky also. So anyway, I guess what I mean to say is that I appreciate any and all deliberate discussion during council reports that kind of, definitely gives me a sense of where you are about what should be showing up soon.
Can I add one thing? That just that, if I bring it up at council, say, hey, I'd like this on the agenda, is the first time you're also saying, hey, public, I'm bringing up something that you might want to keep an eye on if this interests you. And the other is, I understand the idea of, and the frustration of waiting on the in-between weeks, and then now that's 3 weeks out before it's even going to get on the agenda. Because we have to say to the council sort of concerned about the slippery slope, because it's not just going to be a vote, yes, consent, it's going to be like, well, what's the important issue on this meeting? And so as soon as I start having a conversation to try to understand why it should be an agenda item, which I would do at the council meeting, I'm now having an out of council meeting with all of you. And that's where I don't want to fall into trouble with.
So my last comment about that, just like having attended a few, but not all of your council meetings, is that I do, like, just bringing something up during council comments doesn't mean that it's going to be an agenda item in the future. So if you raise an item for a future agenda item, if I was a member of your staff, I would be a little confused sometimes at the end of the council comments if there was consensus to add that to the agenda. So the mayor,
Be a better process.
well, I mean, I think this is the process you have to change it. So I'll just say that for right now.
A more thoroughly documented, do this, then do that, X, Y, Z.
I think that if we try this, this will work. But Mayor, as the presiding officer of the meeting, what I would like you to do is when somebody raises an item to be added to the agenda, to make sure that it's clear whether or not that item has consensus to make it to a future agenda. Because again, like just watching some of your meetings, I've been confused at the end regarding so this was raised, some people were for it, some people were not for it, but was there a consensus to add it? And I could see how there could be some confusion at the next council meeting, why that wasn't on the agenda, but frankly, it wasn't clear that there was a consensus of people to add it. So I think that's one thing that, as the presiding officer, whoever that is, could be, could work on making sure that there's clarity.
Yeah.
Can I clarify, quick clarification? So is it consensus or is it majority to put it on the agenda? says consent.
Sounds like So everything is a majority of the. So at the last council meeting, I was confused about why we're talking about like the consensus of the council. I mean, the consensus is the agreement of the council. And sometimes you need like an actual vote for it to be clear. But sometimes like if you say, I want to add petunias in the park and every member of council is like, yes, love the petunias. Like, I don't think we need to go through because it's clear. But yeah, so if you are voting on something at a city council meeting, it is always majority of the quorum unless it's one of those big ticket items. The other thing that I've noticed is sometimes confusing is that, you know, sometimes you do roll call vote and sometimes you do voice vote. The charter doesn't speak to which one you have to do. I believe your council rules say, you know, you do a roll call vote whenever a councilor asks for a roll call vote. You know, my opinion, I like things pretty clear. And so I just love the roll call vote. So I'm never going to tell you not to do. I'm going to keep moving just because I do think we have a lot of stuff to get to. So the next one is like very similar. It's individual requests of staff. And you know, the first high bullet is charter can attempt to influence the city manager and his duties, and the city manager is the person who sets the workload for the staff that work for him. Your municipal code also talks about it. It says council members shall not direct the activities or workload of city staff members. Individual requests from council members for staff assistance shall be presented to the city manager orally or in writing for approval. So that's in your municipal code. That's sort of the law of the land, unless you change that by ordinance, that if you want city staff to do something, you ask their boss, who is the city manager. Now, we talked about that there has to be a balance. I think one of everybody's goals is to have efficient and effective council meetings, and sometimes you might have a question. And sometimes it's great for the city if you have some of those definite questions, or you have some of those questions, or something's unclear, to ask it ahead of the meeting, and then the city manager can say like, yes, definitely, we should add that report to the packet, or I should definitely have that information going in, or just answering a clarifying question before that happens across the board. But again, like agenda items, there has to be some process or guardrail on how we're using the city manager and city staff, because he doesn't report to each one of you individually, and it would be an incredibly inefficient use of staff members' time if he did. So you have council rules that address this, and it says limiting individual contacts with city staff to the city manager, executive manager, other designated staff, as to not influence staff decisions or recommendations, interfere with their work performance, or undermine the city manager authority, or prevent the full council from having the benefit of any information received. You also have, and this is one that, you know, I might, you know, just because this has been an issue with the city, that we might consider looking at, which is, to this end, members of the city council shall not request staff to perform significant work without the prior approval of the city manager, so that workloads and work plans are not adversely impacted. So go to the next slide. So this is very similar language from the League of Oregon Cities model rules. But they actually define what it means to be a significant project. And they say questions from individual members of council requiring significant time or resources, 2 hours or more, shall normally require the approval of the council. So that defines, like, is individual members of councils, can you call up Bill and ask a question? Yes, you can. You know, the council rules have delegated you authority over and above that of a citizen on the street to contact Bill and use his time. But what these council rules are saying, that can't be more than 2 hours. So you can't ask Bill to, you know, dig up a report for you, or create a spreadsheet, or, you know, things that might be helpful for you to, you know, work through an issue that take more than 2 hours of time. Your current council rules say significant amount of time. You might want to consider defining what a significant amount of time is. And City Council or League of Oregon Cities has suggested 2 hours or more. And again, it's whatever balance you guys want to strike between having additional access to the city manager and, you know, making sure that we're using that person's time in the interest of the entire body rather than individual members.
Several times I asked about our reports we have, like, when we have notes, they're and this is for Lori, sorry. They're printed single page, so you have to have these big, huge binders of 400 documents in 400 pages, so 400 pages and 200 documents. Requesting that will be done through the city, right? The city manager saying, can we just have it done on double-sided pages, so take up less resources or less storage and less weight and everything else by half?
So you
Would
could,
that be done through that, or would that be something that be requested
I mean,
through bill, or they have create an ordinance for environmental savings, or?
I mean, I think that's a request that you could make to Bill. And like, because Bill, again, I would definitely consider that an administrative decision at the city. It's time, it's resources, it's priority. So as anybody, a council member, a Joe Schmo off the street, you can make that suggestion to Bill and Bill can decide to do it. Or, you know, Bill's like, nope, I like one-sided, you know, he disagrees, he can do that. And then perhaps you can bring it up at the council meeting, you can discuss it at the council, and let's say the council says, yeah, Bill, what do you got against trees? You know, like, could you do double-sided? Bill still is the administrative head of the city, and so he can still tell you all to go pound sand about the two-sided page thing. But, you know, you're Bill's boss, and like, the reality is that like, if you're telling him to do something, unless he strongly disagrees, he's probably gonna start printing on two sides of paper. Well, let's say that he doesn't. Then you bring it up in his evaluation and it's, you know, part of that process. And if he is consistently, you know, ignoring the advice or the, you know, suggestions of council, then, you know, that's a decision that you make about whether that's the person that you want to be your city manager.
Right, how about the evaluation for an individual person, say, hey, Bill, I want you to give me this spreadsheet, need it by tomorrow by 2 o'clock.
Great
And one
segue.
person did
Next.
that, and at the council, would that be not the evaluation?
He has it on the slide.
Yep. So that's a little bit different. So so this is for written information requested by members of the city council. So I don't know if this answers exactly what you're talking about, but you do have a council rule on that. Let's just put it that way. So all written informational materials requested by members of the council will be submitted to the staff by staff to the entire council with a notation stating who requested the information. So if you requested something, then all of the staff should get that too. So let's say that you request something to Bill, it's within that 2 hours, you know, 2 hours of your authority to request that of Bill. He finds that information for you, then he sends it out, not just to you, but to everybody on council. And to me, it serves two purposes. One, this is not an issue that I've seen here at this council, but there's some councils say, hey, why does, you know, this counselor have more information than I do? Well, if you have a rule that anytime one counselor gets a piece of information, all counselors get it, then all counselors have an equal opportunity to be informed. And also, you're able to sort of monitor like how other counselors are using the city manager's time to make sure that, you know, the 2 hours is the right balance for you.
My specific question is, how is it gonna reflect for reviewing somebody's job performance?
So
If one person's asked them to do a bunch of stuff, and everybody else is.
And nobody else is?
Right, if somebody's just like giving budget directions and the person's not able to perform it because there's so much stuff being,
So that-
so weird.
That is
That,
that if that counselor is frustrated with that situation and feels like the city manager is not responsive, then that counselor can bring it up during an evaluation. But if the rest of the council doesn't agree, it's just one counselor's opinion.
so we can't say it's in the charter that this is not supposed to be done, so you can't evaluate them, they can agree on that, or is that something that's still up to the opinion?
It's still up to the opinion of the counselors because you're still evaluating how the city manager is performing as the city administrator without influencing those individual decisions. So, you know, if one person is upset at how the city manager is doing his or her job, you know, that's 1 of 7. And really, the city manager reports to the majority of the council. And so if 6 other members think that he is doing a great job, then it's 1v6. And that, you know, that person, the city manager evaluation reflects that, there's no change in their job.
Slightly different question. I'm always looking at this through an efficiency and, you know, how can we have a process for this? For example, if a member of council had a question that was specific to a particular pillar of staff, Dustin, I'm going to pick on you again. I have a public works question. I would obviously, let's say that this is done through email. I would obviously copy Bill as the city manager and as the executive for staff But would it make sense that if the process were set and the expectation was set, that Dustin would take no action without approval? But that way Dustin knew it existed. And if, for example, Bill gets 1,000 emails a month, and after a day or two, Dustin hadn't heard anything from Bill, he might ask Bill, hey, what about that email? Would it make sense for there to be open lines of communication through more than just one individual who through no fault of your own might become a blocker just because you get 1,000 emails a day?
But he's also supposed to be the gatekeeper. So let's scroll up.
Okay.
He's also
So
supposed to be
CC
the
is not good
gatekeeper.
enough. So CC is not good enough as part, you still cannot
Keep
direct,
going, one more.
you still cannot direct and just call it CC as I'm going through the person because.
Right, and that's why I was saying, like, if we had a process, we've defined that Dustin will take no action until he receives approval, but it's an informed.
What if he received no approval? What if the answer is no? So that puts
Then-
Dustin in a really difficult place because he's trying to please the council and he has the mayor and he has a boss over here and the boss has said no. And now there's this conversation between the three of you, when if you had gone directly to Bill, he would have said, no, the answer is no because of his workload or his whatever. And you would know that that was the reason. And if you still wanted it to change, you would take it to council and say, hey, I think we need this, and have the discussions at that point.
Okay, I see that perspective. I also see your finger out.
So some of this stuff we'll kind of go over in the work session tomorrow, but as far as getting information, you're welcome to ask me in any information whatsoever. If it is a big piece of information that the entire council needs to know, then I would definitely include my boss and city manager into the loop. If it is something that is actually like something big. Let's say you have I wouldn't call it a special project, but if there is a pothole or something ever, whatever, that does not require an email directly to me. We've got a system with report this on our webpage, and that's just a citizen report. So like, if there is something that is in the normal span of my duties, you can report that like any other citizen, and I will deal with it administrative how I normally deal with it.
So let me stop there for a second. So I appreciate Dustin's willingness to do that and answer questions directly, but that's not what your municipal code says. Your municipal code says that the direction goes to Bill, and then Bill decides. Bill can say, hey, Dustin, can you get the mayor this? But what your municipal code says is that, you shouldn't be cutting the city manager out or not, or even CCing him, because Dustin may want to jump on that project, but Bill knows that Dustin has 5 other things that he needs to get done, and it puts him in a really awkward position.
Fair enough.
So until we sort of until you change it, this is the rule that is that it goes through Bill.
Yeah, I think what that's maybe highlighting is just an opportunity for maybe us to document a process and some contact information, because I know there have been some time-sensitive situations. I don't know whether I call it an emergency, but Dustin, when the windstorm happened, you and I were communicating. Nick, when the rental here last night needed some help, you were the only phone number that I had. So I think maybe enhancing some of those lines of communication so that we can reach out appropriately would be a lovely thing I'd love to see as an output of this.
But I'd also be cognizant of what is your need as an individual counselor to contacting the police chief? Like, are you acting authority from the council? Like, where's your authority over and above the individual citizen on the street?
No, it's truly just, that's the only phone number I've got to be a facilitator. This is not me as council asking for anything. This is me saying, hey, goodness, staff needs to get involved in this, and I don't know who else to call.
So I guess that's the issue, is that the direction of staff needs to get involved in this. That's Bill's, because Bill's the city manager and Bill's who's.
So I guess what we need, what I'm asking for maybe as an output here, and it maybe isn't the first time I've asked, is that we need an after hours contact for you so that when something does come up, if you want to be the single point of contact, which I'm entirely open to, that we can reach you. Because I have no other phone numbers than I would as an individual walking
So
off the
I'm
street.
gonna stop there too, because again, this is like a direction. Does the city council as a body want to direct Bill that he's available after hours? Like, that's how
Okay, so I mean, like layers on layers of how to communicate. This is a great point.
Yeah, I mean, this is the system that you have set up. These are things that you can change.
I want to say that also there's multiple ways to solve that problem. And I'm sure I haven't had a rental or a building facility and things happen on a Sunday night or a Saturday afternoon and no one's around. That, it's changing the structure to make sure there is a contact number for the renter because it's their responsibility. I know they want to help, but they're the ones that have to take, they're the ones.
Exactly. It should not be my Saturday. I
No, but so it's sort of say, and for you to know that, oh, that's, here's the contact for renters when that's happening. And that's a simple solution. It doesn't mean that the city manager is available 24/7, but there is a system in place. And so I'm saying, sort of like evaluating some of the systems and seeing how they work and how they've changed and, looking at it that way as opposed to, we need to do this way or we need to have that happen. Because I also think that, we have a very small staff who do a lot and who need to be able to have their time off.
We can get into the fine details of, like whose, fault is and everything like that, but we do have an after hours that is posted on the Public Works webpage, and we also have a report issue that does have an after hours that is posted. One of the things that I did notice when I was looking at the rental agreement was that we do not have the after hours posted on the rental agreement, but some of the questions that are concerned also is that addressed in the rental agreement itself and doesn't deserve a call to the after hour staff in the first place. And so when I look at this, I'm like, oh, that's a process improvement that we can look at, on another day. And it's like, oh, what we need to do is, okay, yes, we have this information. I want everybody, all the counselors to be aware, we have an after hours number. It is posted. Please use it. Maybe we need to add that to our little form as well. But that's going to be a staff decision and something that's done, that's brought up as kind of an after action review of what has happened. But that's kind of how I see that. But ultimately, that's an easy.
Can I add, Justin, that you would take that to the council meeting and we would discuss it and say, oh, you know what, we need to have something changed because these kinds of things happen to me. And so can we look at how to do this differently? And we could all talk about it and brainstorm, and then we could direct Bill, who will then decide which staff is going to do what. Because he might decide to have you do it, Dustin, but he might decide he wants someone else to do it. And that's his prerogative.
And let's say this happens again. Let's say that this issue, and I hope I'm not stepping into anything, but let's say that this is a ongoing issue where it's been brought up that there's not a great administrative method to solve this issue. Then that, in the council's expressed concern that the public has experienced X, Y, and Z, we've raised this as something that the city should address. It's not being addressed, then it becomes a performance issue of the city manager. That's how that process works. An individual member of council can't call city staff and say, you need to respond or, so forth, because that's, the city manager should be taking care of that. And if you're unhappy with how that process is happening, it's happened repeatedly, then that's sort of how you address it.
Yeah. And just for an abundance of clarity, there was certainly no, hey, staff, please do this. It was, hey, I don't know who else to call. Can you get a hold of the right person to do whatever the right thing is? Yeah, please help.
Okay, I'm gonna keep moving just because I know time is running short here. And now we get to talk about me. So let's keep going. So the council rules also talk about the role of the city attorney. And I again want to emphasize that the city attorney does not report to the city manager. The city attorney reports to the council as a body. Bill and I's roles are different. So, however, we're expensive. And so there is, again, a gatekeeper about who can call the city attorney and ask the city attorney to do hours and hours of research. So requests to the city attorney for legal advice that require legal research may not be made by a member of the city council without the consent of the city council. Again, it's decisions about using city resources. Before requesting research or other actions by the city attorney, members are encouraged to consider a consult with the city manager, determine if there's a more cost-effective way to do this. LOC provides an unbelievable resource to to cities that are your guys' sizes, a lot of the times, the questions that you ask can be answered on the LOC website. I don't tell you that to put my firm out of business, but they provide a great service for getting to those questions. So, and Bill knows how to navigate those pages and what's on that, maybe answer that. So outside of city council meeting, members should make requests to the city attorney through the city manager. But there are exceptions of times that members of council just need to come directly to the city attorney. So performance of the city manager, complaints about the city manager. I mean, unfortunately, there have been times where like I've received requests, like there's been an allegation of harassment by the city manager. Are you really going to take that to the city manager? No, you're going to take that to the city attorney. So generally speaking, for run-of-the-mill legal questions, you ask Bill outside of a council meeting, hey, can we get some legal research on this? Bill agrees it's necessary, we're off to the races. Or during a council meeting, at the concurrence of council, we want a legal opinion on X, Y, and Z. That's assigned to our office and we're off and running. And then of course, during Bill's work, administering the work of the city, legal questions are going to come up. So oftentimes a lot of our work does come directly from Bill. We have a public meetings question. We have a land use question. So we do have, like, he does assign our office a lot of work, but we report to you guys. And like those questions should come to you. All right, I'm sure there's not a lot of questions about city attorneys, so we can keep moving. I do want to get to this. And again, this is more of an opinion piece and some legal advice in here too. So one of the things that I have noticed during your council meetings is public comment, and public comment has become more, or can become more of a dialogue and less of the public providing the city council comment. And so this is actually a bullet. I'm sure you're not surprised, but this is generally a standard presentation that we give a lot of cities. I've added a lot of North Plains stuff in here, but this is a bullet we say to every city. In general, members of the city council should not respond to comments made during the public comment agenda time, except to ask clarifying questions. And there's a lot of like good legal reasons for this, but there's also just like a lot of process reasons for this. So when staff, every member of the public comes up, they're, bring up something that's completely random, and then you turn to city staff and you ask them to answer the question. That puts your city staff oftentimes in a really difficult position because it's not something that they're prepared to answer. They're expected to have the answer on their fingertips. They're not able to consult with anybody else. And then they're in public on TV answering that question, and they're going to be held to the response. So, but there are times that, you do want the city to respond to that. My suggestion is that, again, you hold that to public or to counselor comments or counselor reports. That if a member of the public brought something up that you think needs to be addressed, you say, hey, we had a public comment on X, Y, and Z. I would like to add an agenda item, or I would like to assign, or I'd like the city to take action. Oftentimes it does a couple things. It gives staff time to, get that during the council meeting. A lot of times people are behind the scenes looking something up or gathering information. And it gives an opportunity for council to discuss whether or not we want to assign the work for staff. And then to be cognizant of some, freedom of speech issues. It is supposed to be equal public access time. And if, you get the dialogue back and forth, some people are getting additional time, whereas others aren't. Are it certain viewpoints that are getting additional time period and are engaged in back and forth, and other viewpoints that shut down? By not treating everybody equally during the public comment, you sort of open yourself up to that sort of allegation in the future, whether or not it's completely meritorious, has merit or not. And then the other thing that's come up a bunch about public comment is, your community has gone through some tumult, and sometimes the public comment is critical. I'm going to say not here, but I've gone to a lot of public meetings. It can be really rude. It can be abusive. It can be unprofessional. Public comment's wild. What you're saying is that you're going to open 3 minutes and folks can come up and they can provide you their comment. And when you do that, you also open yourself up to a lot of, First Amendment and Article 1, Section 8 under the Oregon Constitution issues about, censoring people based on content. But you have folks come up, some of the questions I've gotten is, what's the point if somebody's being rude, they're being abusive, frankly, they're using bad language? Can you remove them from your meeting? And the answer is, under, federal law and Oregon law, unless somebody's actually disrupting the meeting, actual disruption of the meeting, they cannot be removed. So if you open it up, they get their 3 minutes, but if they keep talking past their 3 minutes, then they're actually disrupting the meeting even halfway. But, there are ways that as a council, and again, this is advice in also legal context, is there's ways to discourage that sort of behavior. And some of it is just not responding, not doing the back and forth with them, not taking action on their comment, like not kind of getting there. If you're not getting the reaction that you want, oftentimes you're not going to have that sort of repeated type of comment. So that's not sort of the comments that you're listening to. You can also set what you consider appropriate behavior. So a lot of times if you set the standard and say, like, we expect public commenters to be professional, respectful, that you're not, taking aim at our staff, that you're, here's the kind of public comment we want. A lot of times you'll discourage that sort of behavior. And there are some, nuances to this, like, do you have a body have an obligation to protect your staff against abusive, harassing behavior? Yes, you do. And so if somebody, one of the situations it's one of Chad's examples is, let's say that you have a public, somebody in the public comment that makes comments about, a racially diverse police chief. You as the body need to be able to step in and protect them from it. So you might balance whether or not you let that behavior, you balance sort of your risks in that sort of situation. So those are sort of my comments on public comment. In terms of legal issues, you're opening the space up to the public. Everybody has a right to be heard. You can't censor based on content. Those are sort of the legal issues I need you to hear. In terms of some of the other disruptive stuff, my recommendation is that you say thank you for the comment, you ask clarifying questions, and then you save any reaction or direction until later on.
Besides looking unprofessional and losing control of the crowd by doing this back and forth, what consequences are there for that? Besides just appearances look like that you don't have control over everything and just losing it. Besides the public thinking ill of you, what is the actual? Is there any consequences to that?
For the individual making the comment?
No, for the council purpose, talking back and forth, having dialogue. Besides the professionalism that and the credibility being lost, what other is there anything that could be?
What I see is that you're treating people different, and you're opening yourself up to an allegation that people are being treated differently because of the content of what they're saying.
Right, but beside that allegation, that doesn't by credibility and professionalism. Besides the appearance, is there anything that's gonna?
I mean, to me, that's a big one. But it also, so there's that one, again, there's a constitutional issue there. So to me, that's a pretty significant consequence. But yeah, then there's just people in the community, why does that person, get their question answered immediately? Whereas when I ask the question, it's silent. People are going to feel like they're treated differently because frankly, they have.
So just again, that clarifying question, you'd mentioned that we had the potential to set standards for professional, respectful behavior, protect staff, and frankly, I think we should protect council as well in a similar fashion. Is that something that would be a resolution or?
So you already have it, to be honest. In your council rules, you guys have section E4, and if you want to look at it, it sets what I would call expectations of the type of comment that the city welcomes and accepts. So I think you have already done that. You as the mayor could decide, I've represent a bunch of cities, and one city, the mayor always has a comment beforehand, we're looking for professional, respectful comments, directed at the city council, not members of staff. So that's what we welcome. And I love that Steve has something to say. Is that
Yeah, sure, Bill. So many of you may know, of course, the last couple of years around after you really awful things that happened during public comment, especially with virtual. So when I was hired with Shelby, the city attorney, our city clerk at the time, and council ultimately adopted protocols. And so at the end of the public comment period there, you're at the meeting or online, you'll see the protocol be put up on the screen. And I'm happy to share with Bill or ask you to look at just as another example of something to that point there. So
Yeah.
it was clear. And then especially when there are items that came forward, the mayor would then step and kind of just upfront, just so they would know, these are our expectations. Well, right, but we have expectations how we operate here. So just one more example. Double with what you said you already had.
Yeah, and like the city of Cannon Beach, again, I spend a lot of time at their meetings, like the mayor puts up a sign that says respectful. And so when people are looking at it, they're just.
Actually, I just had a couple of clarifying questions. One, is there anything, and I reviewed the city code briefly, but is there anything that says we need to verbally speak into the record, public testimony that was submitted via email?
So no, like you typically would put that into, you would add it into the packet, is how I think most agencies do that. And so, public comment that's submitted prior to the meeting gets added. A lot of agencies will just have like supplemental, here are the things that are received, after 4:50 on a day of the meeting. Did you do it any differently in Tiger?
But I'll say they just set a certain time frame, I think, so that as well, just understand. But yeah, nothing was read in. It was acknowledged that they were received, so people knew that they were being public.
Perfect. And then just my other question was, can you help me understand if there's any risk or violation? Let's say we've already passed public comment and then at the very end of the meeting, someone comes into the meeting late and wants to provide public comment. Is there a risk by allowing that? Are we violating any meeting laws?
So you're definitely not violating any meeting laws. That's a good, thank you for asking me that softball. Again, like what I would aim to do is to treat people equally. Like, somebody comes in, they've asked public comment, the council can consider whether or not they want to amend the agenda to have an additional public comment period. Again, like, I would ask yourself, are you allowing this person because you agree with what you think they're going to say? Or is this just how we're going to, do this? We're going to have a separate public comment period, or could you do something like go ahead and submit it or send it to the city council email and we'll all review it.
And then on that note, let's say, someone comes up after public comment has already ended. Would that require a motion from someone in council to enter back into public comment, or what would that look like if we did entertain that idea?
That's an amending of the agenda. That's, adding in it. So the official answer is it's amending the agenda. What is your process for amending the agenda? I believe it said it can be amended. And again, what I would recommend is just, the mayor asked, do we want to amend the agenda to add a second public comment period? The council agrees or disagrees, and if they agree, it gets added. Steve, do you have any experience with that at Tiger?
Adding agenda items.
Like if somebody comes in late and wants to be public, would you guys treat?
Yeah, I think it was as accommodating as possible, I think. I think everyone's recognized as busy schedules, busy lives, so.
So you would accommodate, like generally recommend like opening it up again?
And
yeah,
then just,
unless it's a real busy meeting, it just, we apologize, that we can't get you tonight, we're going to hear from you, or if we send us emails. Find a way to.
Get to yes.
Yeah, and not have them feel like, instead of.
and then just final thing, let's say that were to happen, would we need to take a roll call vote or just a consensus?
So if you're going to add something, you officially need to take a vote, and you can either do that as a voice vote, which is, all members say aye. Or, if anybody on the council wants a roll call vote, they can ask for a roll call vote and you can vote on it.
Okay, thank you.
So with the issue with public comment, and I get that adding the agenda items such, when I was in other cities, one of the things that we did was that there's public comment at the beginning of the meeting for things that are not on the agenda. And then through each agenda item, there was a place for public comment that allowed public to comment on that specific agenda item, but that was a limited time also. And it was, and then it was like pulled it back to council, and council then is then having their own discussion, which the public is not part of. But it meant that you were hearing everything, including everything that's on the agenda in one public comment thing. And so that's where I think what happens, what we've seen happen is that in the middle of an agenda item, somebody had a public comment they'd like to make. And they're not coming late, it wasn't a work issue or anything. It was really more of like, oh, that sparked something in my mind and I'd like to make a comment. So, and it may be that it is open for the public at that point. Or I know that we started out and didn't do that at all. And I've seen Hillsborough go back and forth with it based on what was happening with their own constituency. So I'm curious about that because I think there's a function to it in terms of the community participating during an agenda item versus not.
So I think that's a good point. The law on this is that it is public access, not participation for council meetings, unless there's a specific item that requires by law that you allow public comment. For instance, land use matter, many land use matters. What kind of public comment you allow and when you allow it, that's a local decision. And so Councilor McCall-Wallace is exactly right, that sometimes cities do like open, just like non-agenda items at the beginning, and then public comment on agenda items throughout the meeting. But then you have to also decide, like, do you really need a public comment on every single agenda item or just certain types of agenda items like ordinances or, but do you need a public comment on an, administrative, you're changing your policy for paid leave organ, which likes to change every day. Do you need public comment on each one of those? Probably not. So I guess the bottom line is when and how you allow public comment is generally speaking the city's decision. And again, I think Steve, I love his perspective because I'm the law and he's like, well, Steve Danville, like as a city manager, like you also want to consider these other perspectives, which is giving folks a chance. I'm after 4 o'clock. And I am on slide 20, which should have predicted. I finished almost everything that I have specifically for North Plains. I can cruise through this other stuff in about 5 minutes. Would you like me to do that and save everybody? Okay. All right. Generally speaking, you guys use Robert's Rules of Order. You put that in your ordinance. Robert's Rules of Order should help you and hurt you. You do not need to follow them to a T. You should use them to help create order. They should not be used to create disorder, if that makes sense. Other questions about how council meetings should function, please review your council rules in the code and resolution. I think it will answer a lot of questions about, how do I do certain things? The next slide, you guys directly supervise 3 employees or 3 individuals, the city manager, city attorney, and judge. So, how do you discuss concerns about those? There's an executive session to discuss dismissal or disciplining charges against any public official. There are really specific notice requirements for that. And, to review and evaluate employment-based performance of the chief executive officer. You also have an executive session available for that. These executive sessions are, I believe, and I have to check this, are not available for a firm such as ours, but just individual officers, and that's an OGEC change. So if you wanted, I know this has actually come up, but let's say that you guys wanted to consider a different city attorney's office, you don't consider that an executive session, you just put that right on your agenda. But for the other ones, you can have those discussions in executive session. You need to provide very specific notice. Next one, and I think we've gone over this, many times. All other city employees have the responsibility of the city manager. We can skip that one. And then I think we talked about these before too. Administrative decisions are adopted by resolution. They require less process. Administrative decisions apply to existing policies and regulations to specific areas. Examples of things that are done via resolution, fees, typically you delegate, like the council is going to review this fee, with this, using this, formula, and then you adopt it year after year by resolution. council rules, personnel policies, and these are less process. Next slide. Legislative decisions are bigger decisions. They're typically involve the adoption of more generally applicable policies, standards that apply to a variety of factual situations and a broad class of people. In this expression of local government policy, and the local government is not required to reach a decision on a legislative matter, which is one of the ways it's different from a quasi judicial. But because these affect so many people, there's more process under your charter. Next bullet. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, and then the last one I'm going to talk about is quasi judicial. So quasi judicial decisions are when you're making a decision and applying your municipal code regarding a dispute. Where this comes up where it comes up the most is land use. So you have two people who are arguing about the application of your code to a land use situation. It involves two different property owners. It's reached the city council level. You're then acting as a body, as a judge. And this is you adopt these sort of decisions via an order. And we can talk about this more at a later meeting, but because you're making a decision that's, applicable to two different parties, you're supposed to be an impartial decision maker. There are additional obligations regarding disclosure of ex parte contacts, about bias, about making sure that you're making a decision based on the record. So I just want to highlight for you at this time that when you're making quasi judicial decisions, there are additional aspects that you need to be aware of regarding conflicts, bias, ex parte contacts.
And I'm assuming it would be abundantly clear if that were coming down the pike.
It would be abundantly clear. And
That's not gonna
conflicts of
happen on
interest,
Tuesday.
no, conflicts of interest apply to all types of decisions you make, but bias and ex parte is specific to land use. And I think that's where I'm going to end it today. And I will, we'll set up another time to go through some of the less North Plains specific items.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much.
Bill, do you have anything you want to end the day on, or?
No, I mean, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you, actually, Steve, certainly, for kind of assisting us with all of things. In one day, thanks staff for being here, being a resource. Yeah, we'll just take the next step and we'll be working with Steve on filtering all this down into something that are pillars for discussion and refinements. And then we'll just kind of work on, we'll have an agenda item and we'll work on kind of translating that into some specific budget priorities for the budget. So those are my next steps.
Lori, do you need my card? What? Notes that I did for,
All the stuff
all the
that
stuff we
we
had right
scribbled
down.
for Steve.
I think you read them, but if you want, we can have them.
So I would say yes, I think that they're public records, so.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, you wrote it down.
Do you want me to send it in to me?
What I would do is just take a photo of them, email it to yourself.
Yes.
What about staff?
No, staff.
Oh, and Bill and Steve, just to give you all the information so that you have it when you're bundling everything up, I will probably shoot both of you an email with I had a few items on my budget list that we didn't have time for, and send it over. Good. I don't think we started, but yes, we can officially adjourn absolutely at 4:10.